Chapter 1595. After Ji Tianqing's reminder, Zhang Rong, Wu Su, and the other two all realized that there was something wrong with the mine. The three of them were somewhat worried, and they all asked Ji Tianqing if he knew anything about the inside story. Ji Tianqing did not say much, and he only gave them a few words of advice. Since the commanders and the four protectors have issued a gag order, this matter must be of great importance. Before the investigation is complete, we cannot make baseless guesses, or else we will be severely punished by the commanders and the four protectors. Everyone just needs to be on guard, and we can talk about this later. The most important thing right now is to quickly mine enough spirit stones and gems to complete the mission set by the higher-ups. The three of them understood what Ji Tianqing meant. Unknown dangers and disasters might come or happen at any time. However, if they could not complete the mission, they would be severely punished by Commander Ding in 2 days. This was a real threat. Soon, Wu Su, Bai Kai-xian, and Zhang Rong threw themselves into the mining work. They thought of ways to pacify the miners, and they used all sorts of threats and promises to force them to mine the ore. Of course, they were not idle either, and they used all of their skills to join the mining team. In fact, they did not hesitate to use some secret techniques to increase the speed of mining. For a moment, the large mine was bustling with activity, and there were clanking sounds everywhere. Ji Tianqing did not rest either, and he continued mining spirit stones and gems while observing the situation in the mine. Whether it was the pitch-black pit, the deep crevices, or the messy rocks, he carefully inspected them all. In a few hidden corners, he found some clues. There were a few pieces of blood-stained cloth and a few strands of hair. He used his divine sense to carefully inspect these pieces of cloth and hair, and he came to a conclusion. These were traces left behind by some of the miners before they died, and there was a very weak aura on them that he found familiar. There was no doubt that this faint aura belonged to the demons. Only he, who had a deep understanding of the demons, could sense it. If it had been anyone else in the mine, they would not have been able to recognize it. This discovery made his heart heavy, and his eyes shone brightly. From the looks of it, the miners and supervisors who died one after another were mostly killed by the demons. Who would have thought that the ancestral demon god would expand his influence so quickly after gaining a firm foothold in the Shenwu continent? 2 blood god sons tried to kill me on my way here, and now the demon race is causing chaos in the god's mine, massacring the miners. Actually, he also understood that the glacier god mine was very remote and the underground tunnels were very complicated. It was the most suitable place for the demon race to cause trouble. This was especially true for the miners, who were all at the sky origin stage and the soul refining stage. To the demon race and the blood god, these people were the best supplements that could help them improve their strength quickly. This place was simply the devil's paradise. However, as the nemesis of the devil race, he had come to the glacier divine mine. The time of death for the demons who had been causing trouble in the dark had arrived. Unknowingly, an entire day had passed. Late at night, the 200 or so miners were exhausted and listless. Ji Tianqing ordered the miners to rest for the night and continue mining the next morning. When the miners heard this, their eyes immediately lit up, revealing expressions of joy and gratitude. In the past, they had been forced to work day and night by their supervisors, and they could not slack off in the slightest. Otherwise they would be whipped. They would often have to work hard for 28 days and nights before they could rest for 2 days. Ji Tianqing was unexpectedly benevolent, and he immediately won the goodwill of many of the miners. Everyone stopped working and gathered in groups of 3 to 5. They huddled up in various corners of the mine and slept with their clothes on. Zhang Rong, Wu Su, and Bai Kai-xian all came to Ji Tianqing's side and sat with him on a large millstone to discuss the next step of the plan. Kalan, although the miners are working very hard and look a little pitiful, we can't let them rest. I've already counted. Today, we've mined a total of 3,000 spirit stones and 30 gems. At this rate, we won't be able to complete the mission when Commander Ding comes to inspect us tomorrow night. Kalan, we've only just arrived at the mine, and it's our first time supervising, yet we can't complete the mission. With Commander Ding's personality, he'll definitely punish us severely as an example to others. The three of them were filled with worry and were rather anxious. Zhang Rong frowned and said gloomily previously, I was thinking that if we can't complete the mission, we might as well take out some spirit stones each and hand it in when we have enough. But Commander Ding wants the spirit stones and gems raw ores. I wonder if we can hand in the finished product? As he spoke, he took out 2 gray Chenkuan bags and handed them to Ji Tianqing. These 2 bags contained the results of everyone's hard work for the day. Among them, there were over 3,000 spirit stone ores and 30 gems raw ores. Ji Tianqing was too lazy to count and directly took the Qianquan bags. He said with a solemn expression, "Everyone, don't be anxious. We'll work harder tomorrow. If we really can't complete the mission, we'll do as Zhang Rong said and ask Commander Ding to make an exception. Tonight, everyone will work harder. Try to be alert and pay attention to the movements in the mine at all times." The 3 of them nodded and then scattered to the corners of the mine, finding a hidden place to meditate and adjust their breathing. Ji Tianqing was sitting on a pile of rocks with his eyes closed, meditating and recuperating. Around him and above his head were huge craggy rocks, blocking him very tightly. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't notice him at all. Late at night, the light in the mine was dim and it was very quiet. There was only the snoring of some miners and the low whispers that flowed in the night sky. Unknowingly, it was already 3 in the morning. This was the darkest time before dawn, and also the most tiring time of the day. Wu Su and Bai Kaixuan had been secretly monitoring the movements in the mine for most of the night. Seeing that dawn was about to arrive and nothing unusual had happened in the mine, the 3 of them relaxed their vigilance. But at this time, in the southeast corner of the mine, there was a dark red bloodlight that silently appeared. That strange bloodlight drilled out from a pitch-black crack and spread across the ground like flowing water. No one noticed anything unusual. After a few short breaths, that bloodlight spread to the vicinity of a large millstone. There were 3 miners in ragged clothes lying on the large stone. They were curled up and resting, their consciousness groggy. Suddenly, the bloodlight silently spread out and enveloped the 3 of them. Wherever the bloodlight covered, whether it was skin, flesh or clothes, it quickly corroded and turned into black ash. The 3 of them instantly woke up. They opened their eyes wide in shock and cried for help with terrified expressions. But they were enveloped by the bloodlight. They couldn't make a sound or move at all. In the blink of an eye, the 3 of them were sucked dry by the bloodlight. They became shriveled and curled up corpses. Chapter 1596. After the mysterious bloodlight quickly swallowed 3 miners, it continued to spread through the mine. After a few breaths, the 4 miners huddled together and huddled up in the mine for warmth were also killed by the bloodlight and turned into 4 dried corpses. Following that, more than 30 miners were killed by the blood-red light one after the other without making a sound. One after another, fresh lives were turned into dried corpses in their muddle-headedness and deep sleep. Their expressions of fear and despair, their desperate struggles before death, were all in vain. They were unable to make a single sound. The same scene played out over and over again. 45 minutes later, one of the miners turned over in a daze. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a red light not far away and a few ferocious-looking dried corpses. He was scared out of his wits on the spot. His eyes widened in shock, and his entire body trembled. After staring blankly for about 2 seconds, he cried out with a trembling voice, "Ah! The red shadow demon is here again." The sudden cry broke the silence of the mine. It echoed in the night sky and could be heard clearly from hundreds of miles away. Almost all of the miners were instantly woken up. No matter if they were in a deep sleep, half asleep, or too anxious to sleep, they all got up and fled towards the exit of the mine in a panic. They didn't dare to take another look. They didn't even dare to look for traces of the red shadow demon. They only wanted to leave the mine as quickly as possible. Obviously, this was already their habitual reaction. This kind of terrifying thing had happened many times in the past month. The mine became noisy and noisy. Cries of alarm could be heard everywhere. More than 200 miners fled the mine as if their lives were on the line, crowding at the exit. Ji Tianqing, Zhang Rong, Wu Su, and the others were also immediately woken up. However, when the first cry of alarm sounded, the mysterious bloodlight burrowed into the ground and disappeared. When Ji Tianqing and the other 3 rushed into the sky and looked around with sharp eyes, the mysterious bloodlight had already disappeared without a trace. What's going on? What happened? I didn't hear anything unusual. Why are these miners acting like they've seen a ghost? Wu Su, Zhang Rong, and Bai Kaixuan all had puzzled expressions on their faces. Only Ji Tianqing's face was gloomy. His sharp eyes swept across every corner, searching for any abnormalities in the darkness. Suddenly, his gaze fixed on the southeast corner of the mine. "Come with me," He brought Zhang Rong and the other two across the dark night sky, and arrived near a large rock in the southeast corner. Shockingly, 3 charred and dried corpses lay on the flat millstone, and their state of death was extremely miserable and hideous. Ji Tianqing frowned and observed with a gloomy face. Zhang Rong, Wu Su, and the other two jumped in fright, their faces instantly turning deathly pale. What's going on? Aren't these 3 miners? Why have they become dried corpses? This is too. Their mouths. This was the first time the 3 of them had seen such a miserable death. Their hearts thumped wildly and their emotions were somewhat anxious. Ji Tianqing observed for a moment and a sharp cold light flashed across his eyes. He thought to himself, such a familiar scene is happening again. Looks like I guessed correctly. It's the blood god son of the god fiend who did this. At this time, Wu Su pointed at a mine not far away and let out a cry of surprise. Quick, look over there. There are a few dried corpses too. The group hurriedly flew into the mine and checked the state of the dried corpses. Following that, Ji Tianqing, Zhang Rong, and the rest found even more dried corpses in the surrounding corners. The state of death of each dried corpse was similar. It was miserable and hideous, sending chills down one's spine. The 4 of them searched the entire mine and finally found 39 dried corpses. Under Ji Tianqing's request, Zhang Rong, Wu Su, and the other 2 braced themselves and piled the dried corpses together. Then, Ji Tianqing brought the 3 of them and rushed to the exit of the mine. There were more than 260 miners yesterday, but now there were only 220 left. The surviving miners were all hiding outside the mine, trembling as they huddled together, talking incoherently. Ji Tianqing walked into the crowd and ordered sternly, "All of you, follow me back to the mine." The miners lowered their heads and silently moved back. No one was willing to go back. Ji Tianqing had no choice but to use torture to threaten the crowd. But the miners were scared silly and refused to go back to the mine even if they were beaten to death. Ji Tianqing had no choice but to calm the crowd outside the mine. From the moment I came to this mine, I felt that something was wrong. You had more than 1,000 people before, but now there are only 200 left. It seemed that the so-called Red Shadow Demons had killed those miners. Don't be afraid, the Red Shadow Demon has already retreated. With us 4 supervisors here, we won't let it harm you. A bold middle-aged miner gathered his courage and said, "The supervisors who were in charge of us said the same thing." But when the Red Shadow Demon appeared, they ran faster than anyone else. They didn't even hesitate to sacrifice the miners to save their own lives. Ji Tianqing shook his head and said solemnly, "Please don't worry, we are not the kind of people who are afraid of death. Also, the Red Shadow Demon has happened many times. We can't keep hiding like this. In the future, we will all have to work in the number 59 mine. If we can't get rid of the Red Shadow Demon, we will all die." Hearing him say this, most of the miners nodded in agreement and gradually calmed down. Only a few miners who were scared out of their wits couldn't help but mutter. The 4 commanders and the 4 protectors investigated for half a month and still couldn't get rid of the Red Shadow Demon. How could you do it? That Red Shadow Demon is invincible. It is the incarnation of an evil god. We will all become its food. Hearing this, many of the miners revealed frightened expressions. Their emotions fluctuated violently and they were very frightened. Bullshit! Ji Tianqing cursed in anger and shouted coldly, "I know the so-called Red Shadow Demon very well and have the means to get rid of it. Whoever dares to spread lies, I will kill him." As he spoke, golden light bloomed in his palm and condensed into a resplendent golden sword. Its sharpness was threatening. The miners were intimidated by his power and no longer dared to speak nonsense. They all fell silent. Ji Tianqing successfully controlled the situation and asked with a serious expression, "Who was the first to discover those dried corpses and the Red Shadow Demon?" Many of the miners turned their heads to look at a middle-aged man with disheveled hair and a dirty face. This person lowered his head in fear and wanted nothing more than to drill into a crack in the rock and let Ji Tianqing ignore him. Ji Tianqing looked at him and asked, "What did the Red Shadow Demon look like?" Chapter 1597. The middle-aged man lowered his head and pondered for a long time before carefully answering the question. For more than a month, everyone has been spreading rumors that a Red Shadow Demon has appeared in the North mining area. Some people said that the Red Shadow Demon looked like a ferocious giant. Its entire body was dark red and it was more than 3 feet tall. Some people also said that the red shadow demon was a phantom. Its appearance was like an evil spirit and it was very fierce. Ji Tianqing frowned and said in a deep voice, "Don't talk nonsense. Just tell me what the red shadow demon looked like." The middle-aged man hesitated for a moment before stammering, "Overseer, if this commoner tells the truth, please don't blame me. The red shadow demon that this commoner saw was different from the rumors. I vaguely saw that it was a dark red blood light, like a pool of blood flowing on the ground. It also looked like a dark red veil." Before he could finish, the miners around him frowned and refuted him with strange expressions. What nonsense is this guy talking about? What bloodlight, blood, and veil? It was clearly a tall red shadow demon that looked like an evil spirit. So many people saw it with their own eyes. Isn't it enough to believe him? I think this guy must have been scared out of his wits. He didn't see anything clearly and even had hallucinations. The criticism of the miners made the middle-aged man's expression turn ugly. He lowered his head uneasily. Ji Tianqing knew what was going on. He nodded slightly and said, "Very good. You are worthy of a reward for telling the truth." With that, a light flashed in his palm. A few spirit stones and a primordial soul-level elixir appeared. "This is for you." He waved his hand and sent the spirit stones and elixir to the middle-aged man with a dazzling light. The middle-aged man was stunned for a moment. Then, he was pleasantly surprised. He hurriedly took the spirit stones and elixir and knelt down to thank him. "Thank you for your reward, Overseer." The other miners around him showed envy and jealousy when they saw this scene. They whispered to each other. Unknowingly, the panic of the crowd dissipated. They trusted and respected Ji Tianqing more. He then ordered everyone to return to work in the mine. Everyone only hesitated for a moment before returning to the mine. Wu Su, Zhang Rong, and Bai Kaixuan silently watched all of this. They were filled with admiration for Ji Tianqing and gave him a thumbs up. Not long after, a new day arrived. More than 200 miners threw themselves into the work of mining the ore vein. Ji Tianqing took out a communication jade slip and sent a message to Commander Ding, reporting the matter of the Red Shadow Fiend. Not long after, Commander Ding led a team of silver-armored guards and rushed to the number 59 mine cave in a hurry. As soon as the two sides met, Commander Ding anxiously asked, "When did the Red Shadow demons appear? How many people died? Did you leak any information?" Ji Tianqing naturally understood what he was worried about. He calmly said, "This morning, the Red Shadow demon broke into the mine and silently killed 39 miners. At present, only the 4 of us supervisors and the miners present know about this." Commander Ding immediately let out a sigh of relief. He nodded and said, "It's good that the information wasn't leaked. You all did well. You must keep your mouth shut and not leak any information. Otherwise..." Without waiting for him to finish, Ji Tianqing cast a sidelong glance at him and asked, "Commander Ding, there were originally over 1,000 miners in the number 59 mine, but now there are only 200 people left. Those 700 people were all killed by the Red Shadow Fiend in the past month, right?" Commander Ding's body stiffened. His expression became extremely unnatural, and his gaze was somewhat evasive. However, he immediately recovered and said with a dignified expression, "I deeply regret that something like this happened to the 4 of you on your first day in the mine. However, you have to tell me, who leaked this secret? Those damned slaves actually dared to disobey my orders." Ji Tianqing couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. He directly said, "Commander Ding, you don't need to hide anything. I've already investigated the truth of the matter. However, don't worry, we won't run away, and we definitely won't let the miners leave the mine." Commander Ding was stunned for a moment and looked deeply at him. Obviously, he didn't believe that he actually had such courage. If it were him, he also wouldn't stay in the number 59 mine for a long time. He was also very afraid of the Red Shadow Fiend. However, when he looked at the situation in the mine and saw that the miners' emotions were stable and they were mining the vein, he believed Ji Tianqing's words. "Well, you're called Kalan, right? You're very brave and also very capable. You actually managed to pacify these slaves. I think very highly of you." Although he said this, he secretly sneered in his heart, "Hee. The ignorant are really fearless. This kid is new here and doesn't know the horror of the Red Shadow Fiend. He actually dares to boast shamelessly. I want to see how many days he can last." Fine. I'll pacify him first and let him continue to work here. Ji Tianqing didn't bother with pleasantries and said expressionlessly, Commander Ding, after the tragedy last night, the number of miners has decreased by more than 30. We can't complete our mission. In order to stabilize the miners' emotions and for the sake of confidentiality, please make an exception and reduce our mission. This. Commander Ding suddenly hesitated. He squinted his eyes and looked at Ji Tianqing. He thought to himself, this kid is really scheming. He actually used this matter to threaten me. However, in order to take the overall situation into consideration and not leak the news, he had to swallow his anger. After pretending to weigh the pros and cons for a moment, he nodded slightly and said, Kalan, I think highly of you, so I agreed to your unreasonable request. You have to know how to be grateful. How about this? Your mission will be reduced to 8,000 spirit stones and 80 gems a day. Ji Tianqing said expressionlessly, at most, we can only mine 4,000 spirit stones and 40 gems a day. Hiss. Commander Ding sucked in a breath of cold air and stared at him with a cold light in his eyes. You're really ruthless. Just cut it in half. Ji Tianqing said indifferently, this is already our limit. Commander Ding must be well aware of this and know how to choose. Commander Ding looked at him deeply, nodded, and said, Kalan, you dare to threaten this king. This king will remember you. Ji Tianqing pretended not to understand and asked with a frown, so Commander Ding agrees? Commander Ding snorted in annoyance. I can't make the decision on this matter. I still need to go back and ask the 4 protectors. Then I'll wait for the good news. Ji Tianqing left these words and turned to leave. Commander Ding was so angry that his teeth itched, but he couldn't vent his anger. He could only suppress his anger and order the silver-armored guards. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and carry those dried corpses away. Chapter 1598. Inside the gloomy mine. Many miners were mining the ore veins, and the mine was filled with the sound of ding-dong ding-dong. Ji Tianqing flew into the air and announced loudly, Everyone stop for a moment, I want to announce a piece of good news. The miners who were scattered in every corner stopped working and turned to look at him. Even Zhang Rong, Wu Su and Bai Kaixian flew to his side and looked at him with anticipation. What good news? Could it be related to the Red Shadow evil demon? Ji Tianqing looked around and said solemnly, Commander Ding came over just now, and I had a discussion with him. After my persuasion, Commander Ding decided to lighten everyone's workload. From today onwards, we only need to mine 4,000 spirit stones and 40 gems every day, and we will be able to complete the task. Everyone was quiet, their eyes opened wide in disbelief as they stared blankly at Ji Tianqing. After a long while, the miners regained their senses and immediately burst out into earth-shattering cheers. Oh my God! Is this real? Did I hear wrongly? This is unbelievable! Our task was actually reduced. I have been mining here for 40 years, and this is the first time I have heard of such a thing. This is unbelievable. Those inhumane commanders actually agreed to reduce our task. That Commander Ding is a scoundrel who eats people without spitting out their bones. He would definitely not be so kind. It must be Sir Kalan's credit. Yes. This is the surprise that Sir Kalan obtained for us. Thank you, Sir Kalan. In a moment, the 200 over miners all knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Ji Tianqing, expressing their heartfelt gratitude. Zhang Rong, Wu Su and the other 2 also revealed looks of surprise, and were full of admiration for Ji Tianqing. Kalan, you are really too amazing. This is unbelievable. Commander Ding is so vicious and strict, and he actually agreed to your conditions. Kalan, tell us honestly, did you get hold of something that can be used against Commander Ding? Ji Tianqing only smiled and sent the 3 of them away with a few words. After everyone celebrated for a while, they continued to work. This time, the miners were clearly in high spirits and full of energy. On the surface, the situation seemed to be developing in a good direction. However, Ji Tianqing's expression was still solemn, and he was unable to relax. Although he was 100% sure that Commander Ding would definitely agree to his conditions, he was not sure. However, what he was worried about was not this matter, but the elusive Red Shadow Demon. He had a strong premonition that the Red Shadow Demon would appear again tonight. After all, there were more than 200 people in the mine. Last night, the Red Shadow Demon had only killed 39 miners, so it was definitely not satisfied. He hid in a corner of the mine. While mining, he secretly took out a few talismans and buried them in different places. Those talismans were a gift from Hong Chengtian before he left. They were all tribulation-grade talismans. They were extremely powerful and had extraordinary effects. Soon, another day passed. It was late at night. The 200 or so miners had finally completed their mission and could rest and recuperate. Ji Tianqing divided the miners into 4 groups and arranged for them to rest in 4 fixed areas. At the same time, he, Zhang Rong, and the other 2 each guarded an area. Everyone understood his good intentions. This was to protect the safety of the miners and prevent the Red Shadow Demon from attacking again. At first, many of the miners were still doubtful. They tossed and turned, not daring to fall asleep. However, they had worked for an entire day, and their bodies and minds were very tired. At 3:00 in the morning, many people could no longer hold on and fell asleep in a daze. Only a few people remained awake. Ji Tianqing, Zhang Rong, and the other 2 were full of vigilance. However, after 3:00 in the morning, dawn was about to arrive. The entire mine was still quiet, and no abnormalities appeared. Zhang Rong and the other 2 were secretly thinking that the Red Shadow Demon would probably not come. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, remained calm and waited patiently. Finally, dawn arrived. There was no change in the mine. It was as dark as usual. At this moment, wisps of blood aura spread out from a cluster of rocks in the northwest corner. Each wisp of blood aura was only as thick as a strand of hair. After entering the mine, they dissipated into the night sky. At least billions of wisps of blood aura silently entered the mine and swept towards the miners not far away in an invisible state. The invisible blood aura emitted a mysterious energy fluctuation and quietly enveloped more than 50 miners. Those who were recuperating immediately fell into a deep sleep and lost consciousness. The few who were still awake were also hypnotized by the mysterious energy and fell into a deep sleep. Even Bai Kai-Xian, who was guarding the miners, became drowsy and delirious. Then, the invisible blood aura quickly gathered and formed a dark red light. It was like a thin layer of red film that enveloped the miners. It seemed that the thin layer of blood aura was about to cover more than 50 miners. Everyone was about to die in their sleep and become dried corpses. However, at this moment, a talisman buried in the rocks suddenly exploded. Crackle! With a crisp sound, the talisman turned into hundreds of lightning arcs and exploded with a divine and violent power, fiercely striking the dark red light. Squeak! The blood aura was instantly shattered by the lightning. It let out a painful cry like a mouse. The Red Shadow Demon was shocked and quickly shrank back. Hundreds of fragments of blood aura quickly gathered together and wanted to reform into a blood aura. However, at this moment, Ji Tianqing, who had been waiting for a long time, flashed and rushed over. "I've been waiting for you for a long time," he shouted in a cold tone and instantly came close to the blood aura. He waved his hand and a sacred white light appeared. That was the power of the heaven-mending orb. It was mysterious and powerful and had an unbelievable effect against the demons and the blood god. Swoosh! The blinding white light immediately enveloped more than 100 fragments of blood aura. These fragments of blood aura were unable to resist and were directly purified by the sacred white light and disappeared on the spot. The remaining 200 fragments of blood aura had already condensed into a ball of red light that rippled like water. It clearly did not expect that there was an ambush in the mine that it could not sense. It also did not expect that Ji Tianqing could release a mysterious and powerful power and melt a third of its body. One mistake had caused its power to be greatly reduced and its strength dropped by 30%. It felt threatened and did not dare to stay any longer. With a swoosh, it flew back to the northwest corner and burrowed into the rocks. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed with a cold light and murderous intent burst out of his body. "Since you're here, you still want to escape? Don't even think about it." Chapter 1599. There were a few tiny cracks in the rocks at the corner of the mine. The dark red light drilled into the ground and passed through one of the cracks, heading deep underground. Ji Tianqing also used the earth-burrowing secret art to follow the dark red light and travel quickly underground. Although the Glacier Divine Mine was sealed and guarded by many guards, it was very difficult for outsiders to sneak in. The entrance of the mine was protected by a large formation, but the mine was too large. It was at least tens of thousands of miles wide. It was impossible to set up a large formation. The dark red light most likely snuck in from underground. As long as it hid deep underground, it would be very difficult to find and could often cause trouble in the mine. Ji Tianqing understood this point and was unwilling to give up the chase. He chased after the blood light relentlessly. There were many cracks and holes underground. The terrain was very complicated. Both parties traveled underground at high speed and quickly left the northern mine. The bloodlight was very familiar with the underground situation. It could always find cracks and holes that were convenient for it to travel through. Ji Tianqing chased after it with all his might, but he was still unable to catch up to it. He could only follow behind the bloodlight and ensure that he was not shaken off. Unknowingly, 4 hours had passed. The two parties chased underground for 15,000 miles and had already left the Glacier Divine Mine. It was only then that the bloodlight drilled out of the ground and flew above the glacier. Ji Tianqing followed closely behind and began a chase in the Arctic abyss. The bloodlight constantly changed forms. Sometimes it turned into wings, sometimes it turned into a sharp shuttle, and sometimes it condensed into a giant blood-colored sword. However, it was still unable to shake off Ji Tianqing, who was flying on his sword. During the chase, the two parties flew past countless icebergs and canyons, awakening many giant beasts hidden in the glaciers. Those giant beasts were all tribulation grade. They occupied an area and were very powerful and domineering. The bloodlight did not dare to tangle with them. It had to take a detour every time to avoid the attacks of the giant beasts. After all, it was only at the second stage of the tribulation transcendence realm. About 4 hours later, both parties flew into an iceberg area. There were continuous mountain ranges and peaks in a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles. Every mountain peak and range was covered in thick ice and snow. When the bloody light flew into a canyon between two mountains, it actually slowed down. Ji Tianqing immediately realized that there was a problem and vigilantly observed the entire canyon. As expected, when the blood-red light flew to the deepest part of the canyon, it stopped. It landed on a 1,000-feet-tall ice mountain and condensed into a 1,000-feet-tall giant demon. It stared at Ji Tianqing with a ferocious expression. "Brat, you actually dared to chase me all the way here. You really don't know life from death." The giant devil bared its bloody mouth and roared angrily in a low voice. Ji Tianqing stopped and stood in the air above the deep valley, facing the troll from 20 miles away. He looked around and sneered. "You actually stopped here. Could it be that the iceberg under your feet is your nest?" The giant devil sneered. "You're not that stupid. Since you've guessed the answer, why don't you surrender? Don't wait for us to make a move. When the time comes, we'll make you suffer a fate worse than death and lose your life in despair." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and sneered contemptuously. "Haha, I've killed at least 50 clones of the blood god. I've never seen anyone as arrogant and ignorant as you." "You." The giant devil's body shook and the sneer on its face froze. It asked in a surprised tone, "Who are you? You actually know about the clones of the blood god?" Ji Tianqing sneered again. "Ha ha ha. You actually can't guess my identity. It seems that the ancestor demon god didn't tell you some secrets after creating you. You actually know about the Lord Demon God?" The giant devil was even more shocked and its eyes flashed with disbelief. It was only now that it understood that this human youth in front of it had a deeper understanding of the demon race than it did. Such an opponent was truly terrifying. It didn't dare to waste any more time and hurriedly used its divine sense to call for its companion hiding in the iceberg. "Frost Knight, come and help me." Following the sound of its divine sense transmission, a dark red light lit up in a nest somewhere in the ice mountain. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, the dark red light flew out of the nest and arrived in the sky above the iceberg. The bloodlight landed beside the giant devil and quickly condensed into an 8-armed giant that was hundreds of feet tall. It had 2 huge heads and 8 thick arms. Its entire body emitted a violent and bloodthirsty aura. "Ha ha! Qinggong, why are you getting weaker and weaker? You can't even kill this human kid and let him chase you all the way here?" The clone of the blood god called Frost Knight looked at Ji Tianqing and couldn't help but show contempt and laugh at its companion Qinggong. Qinggong was not angry and said with a serious expression, "This kid is not simple. Not only can he chase us all the way here, but he also knows that we are the clones of the blood god under the Lord Demon God." Xueqi was clearly stunned for a moment. She carefully observed Ji Tianqing a few times before withdrawing her scrutinizing gaze. "Ha ha ha. It's really surprising that he can see through our identities. However, so what if he knows?" With his primordial soul realm strength, there's no need for the two of us to do anything. Black Mountain can easily tear him apart. Its strength was the same as Cheng Gong, reaching the second level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. It didn't take an primordial soul realm martial artist like Ji Tianqing seriously at all. Cheng Gong shook his head and said in a serious tone, "Frost Knight, don't underestimate him. He seems to have grasped some mysterious power that can restrain us." Frost Knight sneered disapprovingly. "Haha, we are the most special existences in the world. We have undying and indestructible bodies. Who can restrain us? If you're scared out of your wits, let Black Mountain attack first and chop him into pieces." After saying that, it opened its mouth and let out a few strange whistles. That sharp and ear-piercing sound reverberated intensely in the canyon. The originally calm canyon suddenly began to tremble. The ground trembled, and huge ravines split open on the snow-covered ground. The surrounding icebergs were also shaking violently, cracks appearing all over their surface. It was as if there was a huge monster sleeping in the depths of the canyon that was now awakened. Ji Tianqing knew at a glance that there was definitely a huge beast hiding in the canyon. He had seen similar scenes many times after entering the Arctic abyss. In the next instant, a huge hole opened up in the canyon below his feet. Endless icy blue flames suddenly spewed out of the hole, and condensed into a few fire pillars that shot towards him. He calmly took a step back and teleported more than 10 miles away. Those icy blue fire pillars brushed past him and flew tens of thousands of feet into the sky before exploding. Bam! Bam! Amidst the deafening explosion, the pillar of fire exploded into icy blue fragments that covered the sky and the sun, scattering all over the place. Immediately after, a huge beast's head the size of a house crawled out of the hole. Roar! Chapter 1600. On the head of this pitch-black giant beast, there was a pitch-black horn that emitted a sharp cold light. A pair of huge eyes, suffused with a strange red light, obviously had a bloodthirsty demonic nature. It stared at Ji Tianqing in the sky, slowly stretched out two huge front claws, and crawled out of the hole on the glacier ground. Ji Tianqing looked down at the pitch-black giant beast. Seeing its scarlet eyes and black gas lingering around its body, he guessed that it had been demonized. He could roughly guess that this giant beast at the second level of the Crossing Calamity realm was originally entrenched here, quietly waiting for the heavenly tribulation to descend. However, the two blood gods' clones occupied this area and subdued the giant beast. They used a secret technique to demonize the giant beast, turning it into a fierce demonic beast to protect their nest. With a burst of cracking sounds, the pitch-black giant beast drilled out of the ground and stood in the glacier valley. It was a pitch-black giant beast with a body length of 100 feet, with 6 legs. Its body was covered with cold hard scales, and there was a pair of wide black wings on its back. Ji Tianqing was temporarily unable to distinguish what race and bloodline this giant beast was. He only knew that the two blood gods' clones tamed this giant beast and named it Black Mountain. The two blood gods' clones stood on the ice mountain, looking at Ji Tianqing from afar, revealing a cruel and sinister sneer. "Kid, no matter what means you have, you will definitely die today. Enjoy the pain and fear. If you meet us, you will definitely die without a burial place, turning into ashes." Ji Tianqing ignored them, glanced at the giant beast Black Mountain in the valley, and slowly raised his right palm. A black light flashed in his palm, and a pitch-black ancient broken sword appeared. It was the Sword of Burial of Heaven. He opened the sword world and whispered, "Ji Bai, I let you rest in the sword world for so long, you must be bored, right?" As his voice fell, a light flashed in the sky in front of him. Swoosh! A figure wearing a black robe and holding a strange black blade appeared out of thin air in the sky. He was Ji Bai. When Ji Tianqing left Mount God Bestowment, he had brought him with him. In order to facilitate the operation and to keep it a secret, Ji Tianqing let him stay in the sword world to recuperate, and only called him out when needed. Now, he finally had a place to use his skills. Master's order is Ji Bai's duty. There is no such thing as boredom. Ji Bai bowed towards Ji Tianqing, his expression calm as he spoke. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and pointed at the giant beast Black Mountain in the canyon. "Ji Bai, I'll leave that giant beast to you. I'll personally deal with the two blood gods." Ji Bai glanced at the giant beast Heishan, not putting it in his eyes at all. When he saw the two blood gods on the ice mountain in the distance, he frowned and said coldly, "Two more demons. Master, please let me deal with them." He had helped Ji Tianqing kill a blood god before, so he knew how difficult and terrifying it was. In comparison, the giant beast Black Mountain was not much of a threat. Therefore, he had to take the initiative to deal with the two blood gods to prevent Ji Tianqing from being in danger. Ji Tianqing shook his head and said solemnly, "The blood gods are not easy to deal with. Only I can restrain them. You just have to follow my orders." After saying that, his figure flashed and flew across the sky, rushing towards the two blood gods on the ice mountain. He had just flown 3,000 meters away when the giant black mountain in the canyon roared and rushed into the sky, pouncing towards him. Seeing this, Bai did not hesitate to take out his black blade. Swish swish swish, he slashed out dozens of bright blade lights, blocking the giant beast Black Mountain. The powerful blazing white blade light fiercely slashed the giant beast Black Mountain, causing it to fly back and smash into the canyon. With a loud boom, a huge pit was formed on the canyon floor, splashing dust and ice into the air. The giant beast Black Mountain had just climbed out of the pit when Bai rushed over and slashed with his blade as fast as lightning. Swish swish swish. One after another, huge blade lights lit up, like white silk across the sky, covering the sky. The giant beast Black Mountain was blocked by the blade lights and could not rush out. It could only give up on chasing Ji Tianqing and attack with all its strength, fighting with Bai in the canyon. At the same time, Ji Tianqing rushed to the top of the ice mountain, only 1,000 feet away from the two blood gods. His momentum rose to the peak. Using all of his strength, he waved the Burial of Heaven and launched an attack. Broken Moon Sword. Against the blood gods in the second layer of the Tribulation Realm, ordinary secret techniques were useless. As soon as he attacked, he used all of his strength and used his strongest killing move. The Burial of Heaven slashed out 1,000 feet long dark golden sword, with the power to destroy everything, slashing towards the two blood gods. The two blood gods' illusions frowned, and their eyes became serious. Damn it, this kid also has helpers. This little bastard only has the strength of the primordial soul realm. How can he use such a powerful sword technique? As they spoke, the two of them spread out tacitly and teleported into the sky. The giant golden sword struck Cheng Gong with a loud bang. Boom! Cheng Gong was injured by Ji Tianqing before, and 30% of its strength was devoured by the heaven-mending orb. Its reaction was a little slow, so it was hit by the golden sword, and its entire left arm was cut off. Ji Tianqing was about to release the power of the heaven-mending orb to purify the left arm condensed by the bloodlight. But at this moment, Frost Knight, who had dodged the attack, rushed over from the right. "Kid, die!" Frost Knight shouted angrily, holding a giant axe condensed by demonic qi in both hands, and slashed down fiercely. Ji Tianqing did not dare to be negligent, and could only wave his sword to block the attack of the giant axe. Ask the heavens with the horizontal sword. The Heaven Burier sword released a dazzling golden sword, which blocked the sky above his head. The pitch-black heaven-splitting axe fiercely slammed into the huge golden sword, causing a loud boom sound to ring out. The golden sword shattered on the spot, and Ji Tianqing was also sent flying, crashing into the valley below. Frost Knight was not injured at all, and with both hands holding the giant axe, it chased after him with murderous intent, and slashed again. Ji Tianqing hurriedly took out the Kenshin battle robe, condensing a pair of golden wings to protect himself. Bam! The giant axe hit him again, but it was blocked by the golden wings. Amidst the deafening noise, he crashed into the valley, creating a huge crater in the glacier ground, and snow and gravel splashed everywhere. When he crawled out of the crater, Cheng Gong had also reattached its broken arm, and joined forces with Frost Knight to attack him. Ji Tianqing had no choice but to take out the golden sword, and use his secret technique to fight fiercely with the two blood gods. The two sides fought fiercely in the sky, and both used all their strength, using all kinds of powerful ultimate skills. Deafening collisions and explosions continued to ring out, echoing through the mountains and the sky. Chapter 1601. Soon, a quarter of an hour had passed. Bai and the giant beast Heishan had already fought for thousands of moves in the canyon. Both of them had the strength of the second layer of the Crossing Calamity Realm. The power of the spells they cast was extremely powerful and the destructive power was astonishing. The glacier canyon with a radius of 100 miles was destroyed by their fierce battle. The ground was covered with numerous gullies and pits, and there were huge chunks of ice and gravel everywhere. The ice mountains around the canyon were also smashed into pieces by them, collapsing into a pile of rubble. Ji Bai's fighting strength was far beyond his realm. Especially his blade technique, it was godly, reaching the level of flowing light like lightning, extremely fast. The ravines and fissures on the ground were basically caused by his saber light. The giant beast Heishan's body was huge, but its strength was violent, and its defense was strong. But in front of Ji Bai, it was too cumbersome. Most of the time, it was passively beaten by Ji Bai, retreating step by step. Until now, it had already suffered thousands of blades. No matter how hard the scales on its body were, it could not block Ji Bai's lightning-fast blade. Its huge mountain-like body was covered with hideous wounds, deep to the bone, and blood was flowing. There were also 2 huge wounds that almost cut off its neck. 2 of its 6 legs were also cut off, and its injuries were extremely serious. However, such a heavy injury did not make it afraid. Instead, it aroused its ferocious nature. It fell into a berserk state, desperately counterattacking, releasing ice-blue flames that could destroy heaven and earth, wanting to burn Ji Bai into ashes. Ji Bai was as calm and collected as ever, without the slightest hint of anxiety. Other than his messy hair and some superficial wounds, he was fine, and his breathing was still stable. Seeing the giant beast Heishan spit out ice flames, his eyes flashed with a cold light. "Big Dipper holy slash!" He shouted in a cold tone, and his figure suddenly became illusory, bursting with an extremely fierce aura. Swish, swish, swish. At that moment, his figure crazily split, and 36 shadows appeared in the air. Each shadow held a blade with both hands, and slashed at the giant beast Heishan. 36 rays of light that were as bright as stars, with terrifying power, appeared in the sky. In the next instant, when the overwhelming ice-blue flames descended, his figure disappeared. There were only 36 dazzling saber lights left in the sky. They broke through the ice-blue flames at the speed of light and hit the giant black mountain beast. Bang, 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 bang. A series of muffled explosions resounded through the clouds and shook the surrounding 300 miles. The giant black mountain beast's body, which was riddled with scars, was finally unable to bear the burden and was hacked into pieces by the saber light. Hundreds of pieces of flesh and blood splattered in all directions. The black blood that covered the sky and covered the earth was like a heavy downpour that sprinkled down from the sky. Only then did the 36 dazzling saber lights gather together and form a figure. This figure was Ji Bai. He stood in the sky, holding the black treasured saber in his hand, looking at the ravine that had already turned into ruins. Pieces of flesh and black blood were scattered all over the ruins, mixing with the rocks and ice. It was a ghastly sight. So, a ball of icy blue light rushed out of the ruins and fled in a panic. It was the primordial spirit of the giant black mountain beast. Ji Bai originally wanted to destroy its primordial spirit and kill it completely. However, he turned his head and looked at the distant sky. Seeing that Ji Tianqing was still fighting with the 2 blood gods' illusions, he suppressed the killing intent in his heart and turned around to fly towards Ji Tianqing. To him, killing a giant beast was nothing. It was far less important than protecting Ji Tianqing. After 2 breaths, he flew 100 miles away and arrived at Ji Tianqing's side. At this time, the battle between Ji Tianqing and the 2 blood gods' illusions had also come to an end. The 2 blood gods' illusions had turned into a 1,000-feet-long blood-colored giant blade. They attacked Ji Tianqing from left and right. On the surface, it seemed that they were not injured and their attacks were very fierce. They seemed to have the upper hand. But in reality, their bodies had been destroyed more than 10 times and their strength had decreased by about 40%. At most, in 100 breaths of time, Ji Tianqing could destroy them and use the heaven-mending orb to devour them. After Ji Bai arrived, he quietly rushed to the vicinity of one of the blood blades. This blood blade was formed by Xueqi, and it was slashing towards Ji Tianqing with all its strength. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Bai suddenly launched an attack. He swung his blade as fast as lightning. Fallen heaven continuous slash. Swish, 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 swish. In that instant, 9 snow-white blade lights appeared. Like lightning tearing through the sky, they ruthlessly slashed at Xueqi. But this was not the end. One after another, snow-white blade lights appeared. The power increased layer by layer, each blade faster than the previous one slashing towards Xueqi. Clang, 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 clang. A series of collision sounds burst out. It was actually like the sound of metal clashing. The blood blade formed by Xueqi was continuously slashed 49 times in a short 2 breaths. After suffering such a heavy blow, It could no longer hold on and the blood blade collapsed on the spot. However, the blood fragments that covered the sky immediately condensed into a blood-colored giant, angrily staring at Ji Bai. "Damn bastard, you dare to sneak attack me? You're courting death." Xueqi angrily cursed. He madly used a demonic path secret technique, releasing a sky full of bloodlight towards Ji Bai. Ji Bai hurriedly teleported to dodge and swung his blade to block Xueqi's attack. Both sides were entangled in the sky and engaged in an intense battle. Seeing this scene, Chen Gong was filled with worry. He hurriedly attacked Ji Bai to help Xueqi. However, Ji Tianxing was already prepared and immediately used his ultimate move. White Tiger Sacred Sword. His body ignited with golden flames as his body fused with the golden primordial spirit sword. The Burial of Heaven sword also expanded to 1,000 feet tall and fused with the golden sword. Immediately, the golden primordial spirit sword's power increased by 4 times as it ruthlessly slashed towards Chen Gong. Chen Gong had a bad premonition and immediately wanted to teleport away. However, his vitality was already greatly damaged and his aura was locked by the golden sword. He was suppressed to the point that he could not move. How could he escape? Bang! With a muffled sound, he was slashed by the golden primordial spirit sword and shattered into pieces. Tens of thousands of blood fragments hurriedly retreated into the distance and quickly gathered together, wanting to reform his body. However, at this moment, the golden primordial spirit sword released a mysterious white light. Like a huge net that covered the sky, it covered the blood fragments. Swoosh! Countless blood fragments were enveloped by the mysterious white light. The white light contained a divine power that quickly purified the blood fragments and devoured them. In just a few breaths of time, all the blood fragments were devoured and disappeared without a trace. Blood god's son Chen Gong was killed and turned into nourishment for the heaven-mending orb. The golden primordial spirit sword immediately turned around and flew towards Ji Bai and Xueqi. At this moment, Ji Bai and Xueqi were fighting in the sky dozens of miles away. Ji Bai's blade technique and strength were slightly better than Xueqi and had the upper hand. Chapter 1602. Ji Bai had long known the characteristics of the blood god's son, which was almost immortal. Therefore, he did not expect to be able to kill Frost Knight. He only wanted to entangle Frost Knight and weaken its strength as much as possible. When Ji Tianxing arrived at the battlefield, Frost Knight had just been forced back by Ji Bai's several sword lights. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Tianxing did not hesitate to attack. Vermilion Bird's Sacred Sword. At this time, he maintained the state of fusion with the golden sword and Burial of Heaven. The 1,000-feet-long golden sword ignited with bright golden flames, condensing into a mountain-like vermilion bird phantom. Its power was terrifying to the extreme. Boom! Frost Knight did not have time to dodge and was slashed by the golden sword. With a loud explosion, it was shattered into dozens of pieces on the spot by the giant sword. The dark red bloodlight fragments scattered in all directions, but they quickly gathered together. Ji Tianxing did not give it a chance to reform its body. Without hesitation, he scattered the sacred white light towards the bloodlight fragments. Swoosh! At least 30 bloodlight fragments were enveloped by the sacred white light. The demonic qi and evil power contained in the fragments were quickly purified by the white light. The remaining pure power was also quickly devoured by the heaven-mending orb. However, there were still dozens of bloodlight fragments that escaped the sacred white light. They had already gathered together to form a giant crimson sword that was over 100 feet in length. Swoosh! The bloodlight sword did not dare to stay. Without hesitation, it turned and flew away, escaping towards the ice mountain not far away. The ice mountain was at the end of the canyon, where Frost Knight and Chen Gong's nest were. Previously, when Ji Bai fought with the Black Mountain giant beast, the aftermath of the battle was not able to destroy the ice mountain. After all, the ice mountain was protected by a powerful array. Don't even think about escaping. Seeing that Frost Knight still wanted to escape back to its nest, Ji Bai's tone was cold and angry. He waved his sword, creating a sky full of sword lights, blocking its front. Frost Knight had 70% of its power devoured by the heaven-mending orb, and was already exhausted. It was unable to dodge Ji Bai's sword light. Bang bang bang! A series of muffled sounds burst out, and it was once again cut into dozens of pieces, scattering in the sky. Before it could reform its body, Ji Tianxing had already arrived. Shwa! Another wave of holy white light shone down, enveloping all of the fragments. This time, Frost Knight had nowhere to run. The dozens of bloody light fragments were quickly purified by the holy white light and were quickly devoured. Seeing that the battle was over, Ji Bai heaved a sigh of relief. He was about to withdraw his saber and fly back to Ji Tianqing's side. But at this moment, a black shadow suddenly flew out from the ice mountain 100 miles away. Swish! The black shadow flew into the sky and immediately disappeared. In the next instant, when it appeared again, it was already behind Ji Bai, less than 300 meters away. The black shadow released a wave of black qi, which condensed into a millstone-sized palm, which silently slapped towards Ji Bai. Ji Bai suddenly realized that something was wrong. His face changed and the nerves in his body tensed up. A strong sense of danger made him feel as if there was a thorn in his back. He subconsciously teleported away, but it was already too late. Boom! With a muffled sound, he was hit by the mysterious black palm. He spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot and flew 10 miles away. At the same time, Ji Tianqing had just finished off Frost Knight and controlled the heaven-mending orb to finish devouring it. Swish! With a flash of brilliance, he removed the fusion state with the golden sword and returned to his original appearance. The Burial of Heaven's sword also returned to its original state and was held in his hand. Only the 1,000-meter-tall primordial spirit golden sword was still floating in the sky behind him. He looked at the black shadow with a gloomy face and sized it up with a sharp gaze. He saw that a small figure was wrapped in a dense black qi. It was a 1-meter-tall child wearing pitch-black leather armor. His arms and legs were exposed to the air. At a glance, his skin was as dark as charcoal, and his body was covered with fine black hair. His face was also very ugly and ferocious, not like a normal person. He had a huge bald head with a dark red mysterious pattern engraved on it. It was a distorted face with 2 dark green eyeballs embedded in it. Under his collapsed nose was a large flat mouth that resembled a toad's. His mouth could not close, revealing 2 sharp fangs, and black saliva continuously dripped from the corners of his mouth. Such an ugly and ferocious face was unforgettable. The most eye-catching thing was that his neck, arms, and legs were covered with evil spirit patterns and patterns. His 4 limbs were short and thick, and he had a ferocious appearance. His entire body emitted an icy aura of death. When Ji Tianqing saw his appearance, he frowned fiercely, and his eyes flickered with suspicion. This little monster doesn't look like a human at all. Is he a demon? But the demons on the profound sky continent don't look like that. They're all tall giants. Also, I've looked through the history books of the Shenwu continent, but I haven't seen any records of the demons. There are no demons on this continent. Just as he was feeling puzzled, the ugly child covered in ghostly tattoos opened his mouth and spoke. This is unbelievable. You damned worm, you actually chased me all the way here and killed 2 of my blood gods. The blood god scions were immortal and indestructible, so it was impossible for them to be completely killed. Little worm, what secret technique did you use to kill Gong and Xueqi? The ghostly child spoke in the common language of the Shenwu continent. Ji Tianqing stared at him expressionlessly and asked, Who are you? How are you related to the ancestral demon god? If you answer my question, I'll tell you the answer you want to know. The ghostly child sneered and looked at him playfully for a moment. Then he said in a low voice, There's no harm in telling you. I'm Ghost Child, one of the 36 demon monarchs. As for the ancestral demon god, he's the ancestor and leader of my clan. 36 demon monarchs? Ji Tianqing frowned and thought to himself, Ghost Child is stronger than Ji Bai. He's at least at the 3rd or 4th level of Tribulation Realm. The ancestral demon god has only escaped to the Shenwu continent for half a year, but he's already recruited 36 such powerful demon monarchs? He simply could not believe that the ancestral demon god had such powerful methods and abilities. Previously, he had been planning to take advantage of the fact that the ancestral demon god had yet to recover his strength to quickly find him and completely eliminate him. Now, it seemed that his plan was destined to fail, and it was impossible to realize it. However, Ghost Child's words had confirmed one thing. Ghost Child was indeed a demon, but he was not a demon from the profound sky continent. Instead, he was a demon from the Shenwu continent. Ji Tianqing did not understand why there were demons on the Shenwu continent, but why were there no records of them in the history books? However, now was not the time to consider this question. He had to think of a way to deal with Ghost Child. Little worm, it's time for you to answer my question. If you answer me truthfully, I may leave you with an intact corpse. Otherwise, you and your companions will become my dinner. Chapter 1603. Ghost Child's tone was cruel and bloodthirsty. His entire body was emitting an invisible pressure, quietly enveloping Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing secretly channeled his energy to resist the invasion of the demonic aura. On the surface he casually replied, "To me, the blood god's sons are not immortal, they are just a little difficult to deal with. After all, I am the nemesis of the demonic race. Even if it is the ancestor demon god, I can easily kill him." With these words, Ghost Child's expression suddenly changed. His dark green eyes emitted a strong murderous intent. You are Ji Tianqing? The guy who came here from the other continent." Ghost Child's expression and tone were filled with shock. He obviously could not believe it. Ji Tianqing heard the knack and sneered, "He. Looks like you already know after the ancestor demon god was defeated, he fled here in a sorry state." Ghost Child quickly woke up from his shock. His eyes emitted a bright brilliance, and he grinned. He. I can wear out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it without any effort. I didn't expect you to be Ji Tianqing. You actually delivered yourself to my doorstep. As early as a few months ago, Lord Demon God issued an order for all the demon monarchs and blood god's sons to search for a human boy called Ji Tianqing. Whoever can capture you will be able to obtain the most generous reward, the ancient demonic inheritance. Ghost Child could not hold back the excitement in his heart. He raised his head and laughed loudly. Ha. This monarch's luck is really too good. You actually came uninvited, walking right into the trap. This monarch has decided to spare your little life. I will capture you and present you to Lord Demon God. Little brat, cripple your own martial arts and surrender without a fight. Don't make this monarch take action. You can't bear the consequences. At this time, Ji Bai had already channeled his energy to suppress his injuries, and flew from afar to Ji Tianqing's side. He stared at Ghost Child solemnly, and secretly transmitted his voice to Ji Tianqing. Master, this monster's strength is very strong. We are not his opponent, quickly retreat. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly to show that he understood. Of course we have to withdraw, but it's a little troublesome. Ji Bai said without hesitation, Master. Don't worry. I will hold him back. You just need to run back. Ji Tianqing shook his head and said solemnly. No, we have to advance and retreat together. Only then will there be hope. After saying that, his entire body exploded with a soaring fighting spirit. Using all of his power, he controlled the primordial spirit golden sword to slash at Ghost Child. Soul Slayer. The 1,000-foot-long Yuan spirit golden sword exploded with destructive power. It tore through the dark sky and arrived in front of Ghost Child. Ghost Child's face was filled with disdain as he sneered. Little bastard, you're really stubborn. You're courting death. He shouted coldly as he waved his palms and unleashed a monstrous black gas that turned into 2 pitch-black demonic dragons that charged toward the primordial spirit golden sword. Bang bang! The 2 demonic dragons and the primordial spirit golden swords collided fiercely, causing 2 loud and muffled noises. The primordial spirit golden swords were sent flying on the spot. Golden light flashed wildly. The 2 demonic dragons were also scattered, but they quickly reformed and swooped down from the sky to attack Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing's primordial spirit golden swords were shaken. His consciousness was blurred and his face was pale. Seeing the 2 demonic dragons coming down, he had no time to resist. At the critical moment, Ji Bai stepped forward without hesitation. Holding the black saber in his hand, he rushed toward the 2 demonic dragons. 7 Slaughter Blade. He held the black saber with both hands and slashed out 700-meter-long saber lights in an instant, charging toward the 2 demonic dragons. In the next moment, the violent and fierce saber lights collided with the 2 pitch-black demonic dragons, causing an earth-shattering noise. Bang bang bang! The 2 demonic dragons were defeated on the spot, turning into overwhelming black gas that spread out in all directions. The 7 saber lights were also shattered, and Ji Bai was sent flying again. Humph! Weak reptile, you dare to fight with me? Ghost Child snorted in disdain and once again slashed out 2 bloody lights. Swish swish! The 2 extremely dense blood-red lights condensed into 2 gigantic blood-red swords that were thousands of meters long, and slashed towards Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing's breath was locked by the bloody giant swords. It was impossible for him to dodge. He did not dare to use the primordial spirit golden swords to resist. Otherwise, his primordial spirit would be seriously injured and would not be able to recover for several years. At the critical moment, he did not hesitate to close his golden wings to protect himself. Golden rock wings. Boom! In the deafening loud noise, the two bloody giant swords stabbed him, blasting him from the sky and smashing him into the iceberg ruins below. Boom! The ruins of ice and gravel were smashed into a huge deep pit, splashing dirt and stones all over the sky. Fortunately, the golden wings offset the power of the bloody giant swords. Ji Tianqing was not injured. But unfortunately, the power of the golden wings was exhausted. The golden light dimmed and automatically retracted into his body. Ghost Child chased after him again and flew above the deep pit. Before he could make a move, Ji Tianqing struck first, striking out with his left palm as fast as lightning. God-slaying spear. His left palm released a destructive golden divine flame, condensing into a golden divine spear that stabbed at Ghost Child. Ghost Child reacted quickly, instantly releasing a large bloody light that condensed into a wall in front of him. Heavenly Demon Blood Shield. The 30-zhang-wide wall of bloody light was like a huge and thick shield, firmly blocking in front of Ghost Child. Boom! The god-slaying spear wrapped in golden flames slammed into the Heavenly Demon Blood Shield, exploding with a thunderous sound. Ji Tianqing thought that this most powerful move would definitely be able to pierce through the blood shield and injure Ghost Child. But the result left him dumbfounded and in disbelief. The god-slaying spear and the Heavenly Demon Blood Shield exploded at the same time, shattering into pieces. Ghost Child's Heavenly Demon Blood Shield actually blocked the attack of the god-slaying spear. Ji Tianqing was filled with shock, but he had to accept the reality. The difference in strength between him and Ghost Child was too great. There was no hope for him to win. Kakik. Little worm, what other moves do you have? Use them all. Ghost Child stood in the sky, looking down at Ji Tianqing from above, and sneered with disdain. Ji Tianqing was unwilling. He stared at him with a gloomy face, silently accumulating his strength. At this time, Ji Bai flew over from afar. Master, I'll take care of the rear. You retreat first. Ji Bai shouted, holding the black treasured sword. He charged at Ghost Child without a care for his own safety. However, before he could attack, Ji Tianqing had already opened the third eye on his forehead. Lightning! Following his angry shout, endless purple lightning was released from the deep lightning god's eye, turning into a 20-foot-long divine lightning pillar that blasted towards Ghost Child. In that instant, the gloomy sky was illuminated by the purple light of the lightning, making it look dazzling. Between heaven and earth, there was an extremely violent and scorching aura. The divine lightning power dispelled the demonic aura and bloody light in the sky. Ghost Child's expression also changed. He narrowed his eyes. His gaze was very serious. Chapter 1604. Before the divine lightning pillar arrived, Ghost Child had already prepared his defense. He used a demonic path secret technique to form an oval-shaped blood shield to protect himself. It was still the demonic blood shield. The moment the blood shield formed, the divine lightning pillar fiercely struck him, enveloping him and the blood shield. Kaboom! A deafening sound of thunder burst out, resounding through the sky, shaking the mountains and the earth. In that moment, the demonic blood shield flashed with bloodlight, and countless cracks appeared. The divine lightning pillar also collapsed, turning into millions of purple lightning arcs, covering the sky within 100 miles. The demonic blood shield shattered. The dense purple lightning arcs enveloped Ghost Child, causing his body to tremble, and he let out an angry roar. At the same time, Ji Tianqing pulled the injured Ji Bai, and flew dozens of miles away as fast as lightning. Although the divine lightning pillar destroyed the demonic blood shield and achieved a certain effect, causing Ghost Child quite a bit of trouble. But Ji Tianqing knew that with just this divine lightning pillar, it was impossible to heavily injure Ghost Child. He had used up all his trump cards, but Ghost Child had not used his true trump card. If he did not take the opportunity to escape now, when would he? He took out a white talisman from his space ring, and activated it without hesitation. The talisman ignited with golden flames, and instantly turned into a ball of dense white light, emitting a powerful spatial energy fluctuation. In the universal treasure box that Hong Cheng Tian gave him, there were more than 30 talismans with extraordinary effects. This white talisman was one of them, called the Great Shift Talisman. It could instantly shift 10,000 miles. It was very magical. In the next moment, the ball of dense white light spread out and condensed into an oval-shaped door of light in the sky. Obviously, this was a teleportation door. Ji Tianqing brought Ji Bai and stepped into the teleportation door of light. Whoosh! After the two stepped into the teleportation door, their figures disappeared in a flash, and the white door of light also disappeared into thin air. At the same time, the purple lightning arcs that covered 100 miles in the sky gradually faded. Ghost Child also broke through the blockade of the lightning arcs and flew high into the sky. The surrounding lightning arcs became weaker and weaker and could no longer pose a threat to him. Black smoke was rising from his body, and he was panting heavily. His head, neck, arms, and legs were all covered in charred scars, which were still bleeding profusely. They were all struck by divine lightning. Even though he had only suffered some minor injuries, it did not affect his ability to fight. However, the fact that he was in such a sorry state was a great humiliation to him. Damned Ji Tianqing! This monarch will tear you to shreds. He cursed angrily. His eyes flashed with a dark red light as he searched for Ji Tianqing. However, the surrounding sky was completely empty. Puzzled, he released his formless divine sense to cover an area of 500 miles, carefully inspecting every inch of the sky and earth. The result was the same. There was no one in the area. Where's Ji Tianqing and that bastard? Could it be that he had already escaped? This was impossible. In just a few breaths of time, with their strength, it's absolutely impossible for them to escape more than 500 miles away. Ghost Child furrowed his brows. He was filled with doubt and indignation. He then searched the area within 500 kilometers a few more times. Without a doubt, the results were all in vain. In the end, he had no choice but to accept reality. Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai had escaped from under his nose. Moreover, they had escaped in a baffling manner. No one knew. Originally, he was determined to capture Ji Tianqing. He would definitely be able to capture Ji Tianqing and offer him to the ancestral devil god for a reward. But now, the duck in his hand had flown away. He was so furious that he almost vomited blood. Thousands of miles away from Ghost Child, on top of an ice mountain. Swoosh! Suddenly, a white light flashed in the sky. Two tall figures appeared out of thin air. These two people were Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai. Ji Tianqing turned his head to look at the sky behind him. Seeing that the horizon was very calm, there was nothing unusual. Only then did he relax. Ji Bai remained vigilant at all times. He calmly looked around and asked, "Master, where is this?" Ji Tianqing subconsciously replied, "Of course we are still in the Arctic abyss. But we are thousands of miles away from Ghost Child. Don't worry, he definitely won't be able to find us. It's also impossible for him to chase after us." Ji Bai's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise. After thinking for a while, he understood. "Master, you used the Great Shift Talisman? And you know about it too?" Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows. Ji Bai calmly said, "Your subordinate's master can also refine the Great Shift Talisman. However, the time required to refine this talisman is too long and the materials used are too precious. Even if the talisman was refined, it would be gone after one use. Therefore, my master only refined a few and was usually reluctant to use them. I didn't expect that master would also have the Great Shift Talisman and use it so casually." Ji Tianqing was startled. He only smiled and did not say anything. But he secretly thought, "Elder Hong gave me so many treasures, pills and talismans in the Chengkuan treasure box. This Great Shift Talisman is only one of them and it is already so precious. It seems that the gift that Elder Hong gave me is really a priceless treasure." After collecting his thoughts, he said to Ji Bai, "Ji Bai, we are already out of danger. I have to rush back to the Glacier God Mine and take care of some things. You are also injured. Go back to the Sword World to heal." After saying that, he opened the entrance to the Sword World. "Master, please take care. If you need anything, just give the order." Ji Bai cupped his hands and bowed to him before entering the Sword World. After Ji Tianqing put away the Burial of Heaven's sword, he quickly flew across the sky and returned to the Glacier God Mine. On the way back he silently thought, "The tragedy in the Glacier God Mine was caused by two Blood God sons. Now that I have killed two Blood God sons, There shouldn't be any more problems in the future. Although Ghost Child is also a demon, he is not a blood god's son. It is impossible for him to go to the mine and create a tragedy to increase his strength. The truth of the tragedy had been found and the culprit had been dealt with. There was no point in him continuing to stay in the Glacier God mine. It would only be a waste of time. Calculating the time, it is almost time for the God Light to descend. I have to quickly return to Sealed God Mountain and wait for the God Light to descend. After a few hours, Ji Tianqing returned to the Glacier God mine. He did not sneak into the northern mining area. Instead, he concealed himself and found his way to the entrance of the God mine. He hid outside the defensive array and secretly observed for a while. After the patrolling guards left, he took out the unconscious Kalan from the sword world and threw her near the defensive array. Not long after, another group of patrolling guards passed by and found the unconscious Kalan. Everyone went forward to check on the situation and quickly brought Kalan into the God mine. Ji Tianqing hid in the dark. After seeing this scene, he felt relieved and turned to leave. Previously, he acted in the God mine using Kalan's identity. Now that he was leaving, of course he had to send Kalan back. Chapter 1605. After leaving the Glacier God mine, Ji Tianqing rode on his sword and sped through the sky. His return journey was quite smooth, and there were no mishaps along the way. Even if there were some giant beasts hiding in the Arctic abyss that attacked him when he passed by, he was able to avoid them. After leaving the Arctic abyss, there was no more danger. As he hurried back, he thought about his future plans. He had originally planned to investigate the whereabouts of the Blood God and the Primordial Demon God through the tragedy in the Glacier God mine. If he could find the Primordial Demon God, he would kill him at all costs. However, he had not expected that the Shenwu continent would also have such a powerful demon force. The two blood gods that he had killed were only small fries under the Primordial Demon God. The true powerhouses and main forces were the 36 demon sovereigns, including Ghost Child. With his current strength, he could not even defeat Ghost Child, let alone kill the Primordial Demon God. This plan could only be put aside for the time being, and he would consider it again when he was stronger. Thus, he could only leave the Glacier God mine and return to Mount God's Seal as soon as possible. What he needed to do next was to increase his strength as soon as possible. He needed to prepare for the God Disciple test in 10 days and prepare for the 3 Divine Kingdoms exchange. After he met Yun Yao and reunited with Yun Yao, he would consider other matters. Unknowingly, 6 days passed. On the night of the 6th day, he returned to Mount God's Seal covered in dust. Fortunately, he had returned in time. Tomorrow was the day when the divine light would descend. Ji Tianqing quietly returned to Mount God's Seal without alerting anyone else. When he returned to the eastern courtyard of Heaven's Saint Palace, it was already late at night, and everything was silent. He was mentally exhausted. After entering the secret room, he took a pill and sat down to meditate. The night passed quickly. By daybreak, his magic power had mostly recovered, and his mental state was much better. When the sun rose, he ended his cultivation. After changing into a clean set of clothes, he left the secret room and rushed to the sacred altar in the middle of Heaven's Saint Palace. Half an hour later, he arrived at the sacred altar. It had been 3 months since he had last come to the sacred altar. The sacred altar looked the same as before, and it had not changed at all. The warm morning sun shone on the sacred altar, causing it to shine with a dazzling golden light. Around the holy altar, there were more than 30 statues of mythical beasts. They formed a circle around the holy altar as if they were guards. He stepped onto the giant stone steps and climbed to the top of the altar. Not long after, he crossed the 99 steps and arrived at the top of the holy altar. On the 10-zhong-wide platform, the ground was dark gold in color and carved with mysterious patterns. 2 divine dragons were circling around it. He sat on the ground with a calm expression, closed his eyes, and meditated, waiting patiently. Today was the day when the divine light descended. However, it was only a possibility. It might not really happen. He didn't have much hope. Not long after, light footsteps could be heard from below the altar. Ji Tianqing heard the sound and guessed the identity of the person. He opened his eyes and looked down. Sure enough, as he expected, a white-haired old man in a white robe had just walked to the bottom of the holy altar and was looking up at him. Elder Hong. He smiled and greeted the white-haired old man. The white-haired old man was Hong Chengtian. He also looked at Ji Tianqing with a smile and nodded slightly. I'm here to take a look. You are still so early. Ji Tianqing smiled and said, Elder Hong, come up and talk. No need. Hong Chengtian shook his head and said, My injuries have already healed, and my strength is slowly recovering. There's no need to devour the divine light anymore. You can continue with your cultivation. I'll just watch from here. Ji Tianqing didn't insist. He asked with concern, Elder Hong, have you collected enough outer space Shenbing and Earth Core Fire Crystal? Hong Chengtian raised his eyebrows and said with a bitter smile, These two materials are precious treasures that can only be found by chance. How can it be gathered so quickly? However, don't worry. I predict that I'll be able to collect them before you participate in the kingdom exchange. Ji Tianqing was stunned. He smiled and said, Elder Hong, are you so sure that I can participate in the kingdom exchange? Hong Chengtian stroked his beard and said with a benevolent smile, Of course. Disciples who can obtain the top 5 in the God-Disciple assessment are qualified to participate in the exchange. 3 months ago, you've already defeated the 4th-ranked genius, and you're ranked 4th. Now that 3 months have passed, your strength is even stronger than before. You'll definitely be ranked in the top 3. Ji Tianqing didn't try to be modest. He just smiled and nodded. He was the Son of God. No matter what kind of miracle he created, it wasn't rare. If he was modest on purpose, it would seem hypocritical. After a moment of silence, Hong Chengtian stopped smiling and said earnestly, Actually, what I'm looking forward to the most is that you can obtain the first place in the assessment and become the number 1 genius. Only then will you be worthy of the identity of the Son of God and become the most valued God-disciple of the Clear Sky Pagoda. At that time, not only will you be able to comprehend the Divine Master's secret technique, you'll also receive the most generous reward. Ji Tianqing also knew that Mount God would recruit a batch of God disciples every 20 years. Most of them would be mediocre even if they became God disciples. Only the number 1 God disciple had the most potential and could achieve great things in the future. He nodded calmly and said with a smile, Since Elder Hong has such high expectations of me, how can I let you down? 10 days later, I'll come back with the first place. Hong Chengtian was stunned for a moment. Then he revealed a gratified smile. Hee. You're really confident, but I'll support you. The two of them chatted and laughed. After an hour, the originally calm sky suddenly surged with wind and clouds. In the distant sky, a sea of white clouds was blown away by an invisible hurricane and rolled into a huge whirlpool. It was a whirlpool with a radius of 10,000 miles, facing Mount God. Around the whirlpool, the sky became dark. Even the golden sun became dim. The sudden change stunned Hong Chengtian for a moment, and then he revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. He stroked his white beard and said with a gratified face, Tianqing, your time has come. The divine light is about to descend. You have to concentrate on refining the divine light without any distractions. I'll protect you. Ji Tianqing looked up at the sky. When he saw the changes in the sky, he revealed a look of anticipation. Great! The divine light has finally descended. If I can refine the divine light before the God-Disciple assessment, my strength will definitely rise to another level. After muttering to himself, he quickly sat cross-legged on the holy altar. He put his palms together in front of his chest and silently cultivated. The changes in the sky lasted for 100 breaths before finally stabilizing. Then, the huge whirlpool formed by the wind and clouds lit up with a dazzling 7-colored brilliance. It poured down like a flood. Chapter 1606. The mighty rainbow divine light poured down like a waterfall from the 9 heavens. In that instant, the entire sky above God's Seal Mountain was enveloped by the rainbow divine light, making it dazzling and brilliant. The divine light contained boundless spirit chi as it descended from the sky, heading straight for the holy altar in the middle of Heaven's Saint Palace. Ji Tianqing sat unmoving at the top of the holy altar, his eyes still closed as he calmly cultivated. He could clearly feel the boundless spiritual energy pouring down from the top of his head. The next moment, the first rainbow divine light descended on the holy altar, drowning his figure. Swoosh! Instantly, boundless rainbow-colored divine light descended one after another, enveloping him and the entire holy altar. He did not feel any discomfort, nor did he feel any pain. All the pores on his body naturally opened as if they were greedily breathing, trying their best to devour the rainbow divine light. That dazzling rainbow divine light was formed by the extremely rich nine heavens spiritual liquid. It contained the purest dharmic power, the richest spirit chi of heaven and earth, and some mysterious power. That mysterious power could not only temper his body, but also rapidly strengthen his essence spirit. He guessed that this mysterious power was probably unique to the divine nations. Not long after, the rainbow divine light in the sky dissipated. The vortex with a radius of 10,000 miles also gradually collapsed, and the sky returned to its calm state. The divine light that descended from the nine heavens all gathered at the holy altar, surging like a tidal wave, but it did not dissipate. Ji Tianqing was submerged in the rainbow divine light, and he could only focus on devouring the divine light with all his might, refining it for his own use. Hong Chengtian stood below the holy altar, looking at the surging divine light. He smiled and stroked his beard, his voice filled with gratification. The winds and clouds of the nine heavens change drastically, and once they meet the divine light, they transform into dragons. Tianqing's luck is extremely good. The nine heavens divine light that he attracted this time is actually so vast and mighty. The divine light that I receive every year is not even half of this. Looks like his strength has increased explosively this time. Hong Chengtian's tone was somewhat emotional and envious. But he only felt gratified and expectant, happy for Ji Tianqing. Although he was not related to Ji Tianqing, his relationship with Ji Tianqing was even if it was not that of a master and disciple. He was happy that Ji Tianqing could benefit from it. He was also gratified that Ji Tianqing could create miracles and honor. If he could help Ji Tianqing, he would help. If there was something he could teach Ji Tianqing, he would not hold back and teach him everything he knew. To be honest, he and Ji Tianqing were more like good friends despite their age difference. At the same time, many people on Mount God Bestowment were alarmed by the changes in the sky and the seven-colored divine light. The descent of the rainbow-colored divine light brought with it vast and mighty spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Faint five-colored spiritual chi fell from the sky and enveloped the entire Mount God Bestowment. Whether it was the guards, the maids, or the 50 young geniuses, all of them could clearly feel that the spiritual chi of heaven and earth had increased by several times. Many people revealed looks of shock as they looked in the direction of the Heaven Saint Palace. Everyone could clearly see that the resplendent Heaven Saint Palace was shrouded in a seven-colored radiance, looking extremely dazzling. Without a doubt, the divine light descending from the nine heavens had landed in the Heaven Saint Palace. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth that everyone absorbed was only a drop in the ocean of the divine light. The majority of the divine light was within the Heaven Saint Palace. Thinking of this, everyone's hearts were filled with envy and jealousy. Especially the young geniuses of various countries. Their emotions were even more complicated. Many thoughts flashed through their minds. The divine light has descended upon the Heaven Saint Palace. That is the place with the densest spiritual chi. Ji Tianqing is staying in the Heaven Saint Palace. He will definitely be able to devour a large amount of divine light and increase his strength greatly. Damn it! He doesn't cultivate as hard as we do, and he has to go through fewer hardships than we do, but he can reap the greatest benefits. It's really infuriating to compare oneself to others. The top geniuses will obtain the most cultivation resources and increase their strength the fastest. The gap between them and us will also quickly widen. I wonder what realm Ji Tianqing's strength will reach after he devours all that divine light. Will he be able to enter the top 3 in the God-Disciple test in 10 days? Many geniuses pondered with complicated emotions for a moment before regaining their composure and continuing their cultivation. The guards and maids gathered in groups of 3 to 5. After discussing for an hour, they dispersed one after another. Within the Heaven Saint Palace, the seven-colored divine light enveloping the holy altar lasted for an entire day. Only when night fell did the dazzling seven-colored divine light disappear. All the divine light had been devoured. Of course, the energy contained within the divine light was too vast. With Ji Tianqing's strength, it was impossible for him to devour all of it. He had devoured about 50%, the Burial of Heaven had devoured 30%, and the Heaven Mending Pearl had devoured 20%. Even so, he could not refine the 50% of divine light he had devoured in a short period of time. He could only store the divine light in his body first and slowly refine and absorb it in the future to gradually increase his strength. When the divine light dissipated and the holy altar regained its calm, Ji Tianqing ended his cultivation and opened his eyes. A sharp light flashed across his eyes, and his body emitted an incomparably powerful and mysterious aura. Without a doubt, his strength had increased tremendously. Hong Chengtian stood below the holy altar for an entire day, guarding him to prevent any accidents from happening to him. Seeing that Ji Tianqing had ended his cultivation, he anxiously flew to the holy altar and landed beside Ji Tianqing. Tianqing, how did you finish devouring all the divine light in a day? Such a vast amount of divine light, and you are in such a hurry to devour it. It will cause harm to your body. As he spoke, Hong Chengtian looked at him with concern, checking his body's condition. Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. Elder Hong, don't worry. I am fine. I will store the divine light in my body for the time being and slowly refine it in the future. Seeing that he was fine, Hong Chengtian was slightly relieved. Suddenly, he realized that Ji Tianqing's strength realm had changed, and he immediately revealed a look of shock. You actually broke through to the 7th level essence spirit realm? Didn't you not completely refine the divine light? How did you break through so quickly? Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, perhaps it's because I am the son of Oracle, so the kingdom of God took special care of me, sending down such a vast amount of divine light. The divine light's effects are extraordinary, allowing me to reap such bountiful rewards. Hong Chengtian thought for a moment and found it reasonable. He said with a smile, you are different from others. You will always create miracles and do all sorts of unbelievable things. All right, I won't take up any more of your time. Cultivation time is precious. Quickly go back and cultivate in seclusion. Refine the divine light as soon as possible. All right, then I'll take my leave first. Ji Tianqing replied with a nod and bowed before leaving the holy altar. Chapter 1607. In the dark chamber, Ji Tianqing sat cross-legged on a jade futon. His eyes were closed, and his hands were placed on his knees as he circulated his energy to refine the divine light. Hazy multicolored light enveloped his entire body. It flowed slowly like water, flickering between light and darkness. As time passed, the divine light hidden in his body was gradually refined, turning into pure and majestic dermic powers that merged with his body. He had just broken through to the 7th level of the Essence Soul realm and could use the power of the divine light to consolidate his martial arts foundation and realm. The flow of time in the chamber was 5 times faster than the outside world. There were still 10 days before the God-Disciple assessment. He could still cultivate in seclusion for another 50 days. He was confident that he could refine all the divine light in 50 days and increase his strength by 2 times. The next few days were very peaceful on the peak of Mount God Bestowment. It seemed peaceful on the surface, but in fact, a storm was brewing. The 50 young geniuses from the 6 nations were cultivating in seclusion day and night to increase their strength. In the previous ranking battle, 49 geniuses were eliminated and sent to the Glacier Divine Mine to mine. This greatly stimulated them, igniting their fighting spirit and craziness. Everyone had a dream in their heart. Hidden within them was the ambition to become a martial arts expert. No one wanted to become a miner and die in a divine mine for the rest of their lives. Therefore, after the ranking battle ended, everyone cultivated crazily and spared no expense to achieve their goal. After all, there was not much difference in strength between the 4th and 6th levels of the Essence Soul realm. Moreover, in the previous trial in the Mystic realm, everyone had gained a lot. In the past month, they had digested what they had gained and improved their strength rapidly. Unknowingly, 10 days passed. At this point, the geniuses from the various nations had been on Mount God Bestowment for exactly half a year. The time limit was up. The God-Disciple assessment was finally here. The next morning, the geniuses from the various nations were ready when the first glimmer of light appeared in the sky. Many of them changed into clean and tidy clothes and wore luxurious jade crowns and hair accessories. They were dressed rather solemnly. Everyone stepped out of their palaces one after another. Facing the rising sun, they rushed to the square outside the temple. Along the way, the geniuses from the various nations met each other but did not greet each other. Everyone's expression was indifferent. Their gazes towards each other faintly contained a sense of scrutiny and vigilance. Not only between countries, but even when the geniuses of their own countries met, they were no longer as friendly and close as before. They became very distant and cold. After all, today's God-Disciple assessment would decide everyone's fate. Everyone, no matter which empire they came from, had to fight for themselves. Apart from himself, everyone else could become his opponent. It didn't take long for the geniuses from various countries to arrive at the plaza outside the temple. They stood in the plaza and waited. Everyone was silent and did not gather together to discuss. Some people were quietly pondering, while others were secretly observing the other geniuses, checking on the progress of their strength. The atmosphere was heavy and stifling. Everyone felt as if a huge rock was pressing down on their hearts. At the same time, in the eastern courtyard of the Heaven Saint Palace, Ji Tianqing also ended his secluded cultivation and walked out of the secret chamber. When he walked out of the secret room, the two golden-armored guards who were guarding the door clearly felt that his temperament and aura were different from before. 10 days ago, when he entered the secret chamber to cultivate in seclusion, his body contained boundless divine light. His aura was vast and majestic, like a violent giant beast that struck fear in others. But now, he had become ordinary and plain. His aura was restrained and peaceful, just like a mortal. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that his eyes were dark and clear, as bright as the stars. His entire body had a noble aura that was one with heaven and earth. There was no doubt that he had refined all the divine light. Although his strength was still at the 7th level of the primordial soul realm, his martial foundation was solid, and his combat strength had more than doubled. He had already reached the peak of the 7th level of the primordial soul realm and was not far from the 8th level. Reporting to young Master Ji, the 3 guardians are waiting for you outside. A golden-armored guard came forward, bowed respectfully, and reported the news. Ji Tianqing nodded and waved his hand, indicating for the golden-armored guard to leave. Moments later, he walked to the entrance of the courtyard and saw Hong Qingtian standing under a big tree, waiting patiently. "Elder Hong, why are you here?" He revealed a gentle smile and greeted Hong Qingtian. Hong Qingtian sized him up with bright eyes before revealing a gratified smile. He said, "Today is the day of the God-disciple test. Of course, I have to watch it with you. Besides, I also want to see the results of your seclusion. It seems that you have refined the divine light and your strength has improved. You are not far from the 8th level of the primordial soul realm?" "Yes." Ji Tianqing nodded. Hong Qingtian walked side by side with him and left the east courtyard, rushing towards the temple square. On the way to the square, Hong Qingtian exhorted in a solemn tone, "Tianqing, with your strength at the 7th level of the primordial soul realm, it is certain that you will enter the top 3. But I have to remind you that you should act according to your strength when it comes to obtaining first place." "Oh? Why do you say so?" Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows, revealing a trace of doubt. Hong Qingtian explained, "Those 50 disciples were probably stimulated by the previous ranking battle. They have been cultivating crazily for the past month to improve their strength at all costs. They have all benefited from the training in the mystic realm. The results of this month's arduous cultivation are remarkable. Many of them have broken through their realms and their strength has increased tremendously. According to the Great Guardian, almost all of those disciples have reached the 5th level of the primordial soul realm. There are even more than a dozen disciples who have reached the 6th level of the primordial soul realm. The person who has improved the most is the number 1 genius, Qin Songqiong. It is said that he has mastered the Sky Blade and his combat strength has increased by more than 5 times. Even the Great Guardian is shocked. Tianqing, if you want to obtain first place, he is a formidable opponent." Ji Tianqing remained calm after hearing that. He chuckled and said, "It's okay. Even if my strength increases by 10 times, the result will not change, let alone 5 times. Hong Qingtian was stunned for a moment. He glanced at him with a strange gaze. Isn't this kid too confident? Qin Songqiong is at the same realm as him. Furthermore, he has mastered the superior grade tribulation level Sky Blade. His combat strength must be extraordinary. Although Hong Qingtian thought so, he did not say anything else. Since Ji Tianqing was so confident, Hong Qingtian was also filled with anticipation. He wanted to see what methods Ji Tianqing had that made him look down on Qin Songqiong. 15 minutes later, the two of them arrived at the square outside the temple. The 50 geniuses from the various countries were all present. They were scattered around the square. Seeing Ji Tianqing and Hong Qingtian arrive, everyone turned their heads and looked at Ji Tianqing, scrutinizing him. Chapter 1608. Ji Tianqing stepped into the plaza and found a random spot to stand. The geniuses of the various empires were secretly sizing him up, observing his cultivation level and changes. Among those complicated gazes, there were a few that were filled with hatred and killing intent. Ji Tianqing sensed that something was amiss and turned his head to look towards the southeast of the plaza. There were a few geniuses of the Chu Yun Empire standing there, including Yin Wuk. Yin Wuk's expression was still calm, and his eyes were filled with kindness. However, Lan Yiqing, Kuang Long, and the others' eyes were filled with undisguised hatred and killing intent. Even though Ji Tianqing was looking at them, they did not avoid Ji Tianqing's gaze. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing was stunned. However, he immediately understood the reason, and his lips curled into a cold smile. Hee. Looks like these fellows already know what happened in the Chu Yun Empire, and they're blaming me for it. However, he did not take the people of the Chu Yun Empire seriously, and he calmly retracted his gaze. Seeing his reaction, Lan Yiqing, Kuang Long, and the others became even angrier. The five of them gathered together and discussed telepathically. That damn Ji Tianqing, that despicable bastard. His crimes are unforgivable, and his death is not to be regretted. If he did not publicly offer the treasure to the Sage Emperor, how could the five empires have surrounded the imperial city and forced the Sage Emperor and the Sage Emperor to flee? Yesterday, my family sent me another jade scroll to tell me the latest news. The Sage Emperor and the Sage Emperor are still missing, and there is no news of them. The experts of the various empires are all looking for them, vowing to snatch the sword of burial of heaven. The imperial city has been destroyed by the experts of the various empires, and it has been reduced to rubble. Millions of citizens have lost their homes. Now the entire empire has fallen apart, and the Chu Yun Empire only exists in name. In order to protect themselves, the various city lords and tyrants have all formed their own factions, and they are fighting against the experts of the five empires. Once the war started, the entire empire collapsed and fell apart. Billions of citizens have fallen into an abyss of suffering, and they are at the mercy of the various empires. The border guards were still tenaciously holding on and fighting, but they wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Based on the current situation, it will take at most 2 to 3 years for the empire's territory to be divided up by the five empires. This is all Ji Tianqing's fault. He was the culprit. If he hadn't offered the sword of burial of heaven to the Saint Emperor, how could he have ended up like this? The young geniuses were filled with grief and indignation when they talked about the current situation of the Chu Yun Empire. The tragedy that had befallen the Chu Yun Empire had forced them to work together and treat Ji Tianqing as their mortal enemy. Lan Yiqing became the backbone of the group, and Yin Wuke was excluded. After all, everyone knew that Yin Wuke was the closest to Ji Tianqing, and he had even benefited greatly from it. Lan Yiqing pondered for a moment, then transmitted his voice to the geniuses. Ji Tianqing is not only our enemy, but also the enemy of the entire Chu Yun Empire. If there is a chance, we must kill him at all costs to get rid of him and take revenge for the people of the empire. A young man shook his head and said angrily, "But we are on God's Sealing Mountain and we don't have a chance to do anything to him. Do we have to monitor him and wait for him to leave God's Sealing Mountain before we kill him?" Another dark-skinned man frowned and said worriedly, "We have already fought with him before. Even if we attack together, we were still no match for him. Even if he leaves God's Sealing Mountain, we may not be able to kill him." At this moment, Kuang Long smirked and said coldly, "Don't worry, we don't have to wait for him to leave God's Sealing Mountain. Today we can take revenge." The three young geniuses looked at him and asked curiously, "Kuang Long, do you have a plan?" Kuang Long nodded and said seriously, "Today's God-disciple test is our last chance. If we miss this chance, it will be difficult to kill him." Everyone knew that after the God-disciple test, Ji Tianqing would definitely become a God-disciple and enter the top 5. As for the few of them, they would most likely be eliminated and sent to the glacier mine to mine. From then on, they would not even be able to see Ji Tianqing's face. How would they have the chance to kill him? At this thought, the hatred in their hearts intensified and they gritted their teeth. Kuang Long continued, "For today's God-disciple test, we will draw lots to decide our opponents and fight in the arena. Among the 5 of us, there will be 1 or 2 who will have the chance to fight with Ji Tianqing." He paused and asked in a low voice, "If there is a way for you to severely injure or kill Ji Tianqing, but you will also lose your lives, would you be willing to do it?" The 3 young geniuses were stunned and weighed their options seriously. Sacrifice our lives to severely injure or kill Ji Tianqing? Ji Tianxing is the son of God and I am just an ordinary genius. After today, I will be sent to the glacier mine to mine. I am willing. The empire has collapsed because of Ji Tianxing. My family has also suffered a great loss because of Ji Tianxing and is on the verge of disbanding. As long as I can kill him, I am willing to exchange my life for his. The three of them hesitated for a moment and nodded their heads in agreement. Kuang Long looked relieved and said with a sinister smile, "If that is the case, I am relieved. I have 5 burning spirit and blood explosion elixirs. Later on, each of us will take 1. Whoever fights with Ji Tianxing in the arena secretly takes the burning spirit and blood explosion elixir. You will definitely be able to kill Ji Tianxing when he least expects it." Suddenly hearing this news, the 3 young geniuses were shocked and aghast. Burning spirit and blood explosion elixir? Isn't that a forbidden elixir of the ultimate primordial soul grade? Once you take the burning spirit and blood explosion elixir, you will be able to burn your primordial soul and explode your blood vessels. It will be like a self-explosion and explode with 10 times the power. In this way, Ji Tianxing will be caught off guard. Even if he doesn't die, he will be severely injured. However, if you take this forbidden elixir, you will explode and die. There is no doubt that you will die. Kuang Long grinned and sneered, "Are you afraid? Lan Yi and I have already decided that if we fight with Ji Tianxing, we will definitely take this elixir. Also, other than the burning spirit and blood explosion elixir, we have other preparations. I, Kuang Long, have already sworn that even if my blood spills all over the arena and my bones are crushed, I will drag Ji Tianxing down with me." The 3 young geniuses looked at Kuang Long in awe and respect. "Kuang Long, you are so determined?" Lan Yi explained, 3 days ago, Kuang Long received a message from his family. His family was besieged by the elites of the 2 empires and many of them were killed. The millions of miles of land under his family were also occupied by the armies of the 2 empires. Chapter 1609. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. The sun rose into the sky and shone with golden sunlight, covering the peak of the Mount of Gods. Under everyone's anticipation, the Great Guardian and the 6 gods' messengers finally arrived at the square. The Great Guardian walked to the center of the square and asked the 6 gods' messengers to count the number of people to see if everyone was present and if anyone was absent. In just 10 breaths, the 6 gods' messengers had counted the number of people present. After making sure that all 51 geniuses were present, the Great Guardian said in a serious tone, "Everyone, today is the day of the God's Disciple Assessment, and its importance is self-evident. It has been half a year since everyone came to the Mount of Gods. In this half a year, everyone has been cultivating diligently. Today's assessment is to test the results of everyone's cultivation. The assessment method is very simple. Fighting in the arena is the best way to test one's strength. The rules of this assessment are the same as usual. You are not allowed to use your battle pets or spirit beasts. You are not allowed to rely on external forces, and you are not allowed to kill anyone. You will draw lots to determine your opponents. You will fight one-on-one. The winner will advance, and the loser will be eliminated. In the end, the top 10 disciples will become honorary gods' disciples. The top 5 disciples will represent the Mount of Gods and participate in the exchange meeting of the 3 holy kingdoms. Those who fail will be sent to the glacier mine." The Great Guardian's majestic voice rang out above the square, shaking everyone's hearts and stimulating their fighting spirit. Many people's eyes lit up, and they exuded a strong fighting spirit. Their expressions were firm and unyielding. The Great Guardian looked around and was satisfied with everyone's reaction. He continued, "Of course, the Divine Master does not only look at strength when selecting God's disciples. In addition to fighting in the arena, if anyone has special talents such as array formation, alchemy, talisman, etc., they can also accept my assessment. As long as one of these talents can reach the tribulation level, they can also become a God's disciple." Many geniuses' eyes lit up when they heard the Great Guardian's words. However, the flames of hope that had just been ignited were quickly extinguished. After all, the young geniuses present were only at the primordial soul realm. Even if someone was proficient in alchemy, array formation, and talisman, they could not reach the tribulation level. Then, the Great Guardian waved his hands and cast a spell to set up a large array. A 5-colored light barrier shrouded the entire square. Within the light barrier, within a radius of 2,000 feet, was the arena for this assessment. Everyone was outside the light barrier, standing at the edge of the square to watch the battle. 50 disciples will participate in the first round of assessment. As the son of the oracle, Ji Tianqing does not need to participate in the first round. The great guardian announced the start of the test with a dignified voice. Then, he took out 50 jade slips and suspended them in the air. The 50 jade slips danced in the air at an extremely fast speed, crossing each other for a long time before they gradually stopped flying and divided into 25 pairs. Many geniuses cursed in their hearts at the head protector's decision. They were very jealous of Ji Tianqing, but there was nothing they could do. The 5 geniuses of the Chu Yun Empire frowned with ugly expressions. The chief guardian took out the first pair of jade slips and read aloud. The first round of the examination begins now. The first match, Tao Yunjian versus Gong Tiangao. As his voice fell, the 2 young geniuses whose names were called walked out of the crowd with serious expressions and stepped into the 5-colored light shield. The 2 young geniuses had strength at the 5th firmament essence spirit realm. They exuded a ferocious and sharp aura. The 2 of them did not say anything superfluous. They did not even exchange pleasantries or bow. When the chief guardian announced the start of the battle, the 2 of them drew their Dharma treasures and charged forward without any regard for their own safety. The intense fighting continued for a full 15 minutes before gradually coming to a stop. One of them had his arms and legs severed. His body was severely injured and his combat strength was severely reduced. He had no choice but to admit defeat. Although the other person won, it was a Pyrrhic victory that left him covered in injuries. After the battle ended, the loser was helped away to recuperate. The victors sat at the edge of the square and consumed pills to recuperate, preparing for the next round of the examination. Following that, the chief guardian read out 1 pair of names after another. Pairs of young geniuses took the stage one after another. They used their mystic techniques with all their might and fought their opponents to a standstill. Deafening booms filled the air above the square for a long time. The dazzling radiance of dermic spells illuminated half the sky, covering the radiance of the sun. All sorts of powerful mystic techniques caused the ground to tremble incessantly. Countless ravines cracked open and turned the ground into ruins. Fortunately, the defensive array set up by the chief guardian was strong enough to block all the aftershocks of the battle. Everyone watched the battle from outside the light shield and was not affected at all. Unknowingly, 8 hours had passed. It was evening and the sun was setting in the west. The first round of the examination had finally ended. 25 young geniuses who were covered in injuries and looked miserable were eliminated. They left the square with gloomy expressions. The 25 geniuses who had won were also injured. They were busy recuperating and recuperating. Their expressions were still solemn. They did not dare to relax at all. Everyone knew that the first round of the examination was just an appetizer. The next few rounds of the examination were the fiercest battles. Qin Songqiong, Song Zhanyu, and Jiang Ningxue were the top 5 geniuses. They easily defeated their opponents and were not injured. They secretly observed Ji Tianqing and viewed him as their strongest opponent. Only 4 people from the Chu Yun Empire advanced. They were Wu Kei, Lan Yiqing, Quang Long, and a young genius. The chief guardian allowed everyone to rest for 2 hours. At dusk, the second round of the examination finally began. The 25 geniuses and Ji Tianqing made a total of 26 people. They had to draw lots to determine their opponents. The chief guardian waved his hand and took out 26 jade slips. After a while, the results were drawn. He picked up the jade slips and read them one by one. The second round of the examination has begun. The first round, Jiang Ningxue versus Tian Yuchuan. The second round, Hua Qingyu versus Ji Tianqing. The third round, Qian Feiyang versus. Ji Tianqing's expression was calm as usual as he listened to the result read out by the great guardian. However, Lan Yiqing, Quang Long, and the other two's eyes lit up. They were filled with joy. The young genius beside Quang Long looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His body froze on the spot and his expression became strange. Obviously, he was Hua Qingyu. He was going to fight Ji Tianqing. Quang Long stared at him and said in a serious tone, "Hua Qingyu, the time to sacrifice your life for the empire has come. Remember, before the battle, you must bite the elixir hidden in your mouth. As long as you can kill Ji Tianqing, even if you die, it will be worth it. You will be the greatest hero of the Chu Yun Empire. All of us will remember your contributions and sacrifice. You will be remembered in history." Chapter 16:10. Both Hua Qingyu and Kuang Long knew that once he consumed the burning spirit blood explosion pill, it would be irreversible. Regardless of whether they could kill Ji Tianqing, he would definitely die. It was easy to talk about life and death. When it came to the critical moment, it was hard to make up one's mind. Hua Qingyu lowered his head, his expression as cold as ice. His eyes flickered for a long time, and his emotions were complicated and perturbed. A full 100 breaths had passed, but he still had not calmed down. At this moment, the first battle was about to end. Jiang Ningxue was the third-ranked genius, while Tian Yushang was only at the 5th-level Essence Soul Realm and was not well known. After exchanging more than 100 blows, Tian Yushang was severely injured and fainted on the spot from Jiang Ningxue's attack. At the end of the battle, the chief guardian announced the results. Tian Yushang was eliminated and carried out of the 5-colored light barrier by the golden armored guards. Jiang Ningxue only suffered minor injuries and returned to the crowd calmly. The second battle was about to begin. Ji Tianqing stepped into the 5-colored light barrier with a calm expression and stood in the middle of the arena. Hua Qingyu was still in a daze as he pondered. Kuang Long was anxious and hurriedly sent a voice transmission to urge him. Hua Qingyu, what are you waiting for? You must not miss such a great opportunity. If you back down, we will never forgive you. Lan Yiqing looked at him coldly and shouted, Don't worry. Even if you can't kill Ji Tianqing, you can injure him severely. When we meet him, we will definitely kill him to avenge you, us, and the Outcloud Empire. Hua Qingyu's fighting spirit was ignited, and he finally made up his mind. A light flashed in his right hand, and a dark red pill the size of a date pit appeared. A cold light flashed in his eyes as he raised his hand and stuffed the pill into his mouth. The next moment, he strode into the 5-colored light barrier with his head held high and walked toward Ji Tianqing with a murderous aura. Lan Yiqing and Kuang Long looked at his narrow back and clearly felt a solemn and stirring atmosphere. It was a determination to perish together with his opponent even though he knew he would die. A moment later, Hua Qingyu walked to the center of the ring and stood 1,000 feet away from Ji Tianqing. He stared coldly at Ji Tianqing, his body exuding a strong killing intent as he shouted in a deep voice, Ji Tianqing, you despicable dog. You've caused our Chu Yun Empire to fall apart. We've been besieged by the other empires, and countless people have died. Today, I will kill you to avenge Tianqing and rid the world of evil. Ji Tianqing's body was as straight as a sword as he stood on the square with an indifferent expression. He glanced at Hua Qingyu indifferently and said calmly, Fortune and misfortune do not belong to anyone. If Saint Emperor Chu Yun did not intend to harm me, how could I have ended up like this? As for the destruction of the Chu Yun Empire and the destruction of the people, what does that have to do with me? If you hate someone, you should hate Saint Emperor Chu Yun. Hua Qingyu's anger and murderous intent wantonly attacked his rationality. His eyes were red, and his face was distorted as he roared, Bullshit! Do you think you can shirk responsibility by quibbling like this? You're the culprit, and your death is not to be regretted. Ji Tianqing frowned and shouted coldly, Looks like you've forgotten the lesson from before? I'll give you a chance. Admit defeat and retreat, and you'll still be safe. Don't wait for me to make a move, or you won't even have the chance to admit defeat. Hua Qingyu's face turned even redder, and a dark red glow appeared in his eyes. However, he still didn't make a move, nor did he want to admit defeat. He cursed with a venomous tone, Ji Tianqing, you despicable bastard. Are you afraid now after doing those outrageous things? Obviously, he was deliberately stalling for time. The burning spirit blood explosion elixir was rapidly melting in his body, turning into countless dark red currents that surged into his limbs, bones, and primordial spirit. An incomparably violent and destructive power was madly gathering in his body. He could clearly feel that his dermic power and primordial spirit power were soaring at an unbelievable speed. In just 3 short breaths, his strength had doubled. As long as he could delay for another 10 breaths of time, his strength would skyrocket by 4 times. However, Hua Qingyu's plan was destined to fail. Ji Tianqing was acutely aware that there was a violent power running amok in his body, like a volcano that was about to erupt. When Ji Tianqing saw his skin turn red and his eyes glowing red, he realized what was going on. Ha! Using such crooked means to increase your combat power? What a useless piece of trash. After a sneer, he suddenly raised his right hand and slammed it over. Heaven-seizing palm. A giant golden palm the size of a millstone appeared out of thin air and slammed toward Xueqi at a speed faster than lightning. Xueqi did not back down. He quickly took out a halberd that was more than 10 feet long and waved it toward the giant palm, creating a sky full of flames. Bam! 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 In a series of muffled sounds, the sky full of flames exploded, turning into fiery fragments that scattered in all directions. Xueqi and his halberd were sent flying and slammed into the 5-colored light shield. When he got up from the ground, he was bleeding from all 7 orifices. A large part of his chest had caved in, revealing his white bones. Although he was severely injured, he did not seem to feel any pain. He waved his halberd wildly and charged toward Ji Tianqing without any regard for his life. Ji Tianqing. The Chu Yun Empire is your sworn enemy and will never forgive you. Xueqi roared hysterically and desperately waved his halberd of flames and golden light. They turned into thousands of spear shadows and shrouded Ji Tianqing's figure. Xueqi's desperate and frenzied charge made Ji Tianqing even more certain that there was something wrong with him. Around the square, the great guardian, Hong Chengtian, and a few oracles who were watching the battle also sensed that something was wrong. What's going on? Xueqi seems to have lost his mind? I heard him yelling about the Chu Yun Empire being his sworn enemy. It seems to be because of the Chu Yun Empire. By the way, I heard that the Holy Emperor and Holy Master of the Chu Yun Empire have disappeared for more than a month. Now the Chu Yun Empire is in chaos and the imperial city has been destroyed into ruins. That's true. I heard about it too. However, Mount God has never cared about worldly affairs. But no matter how monstrous Ji Tianqing is, he can't possibly cause the Chu Yun Empire to be destroyed. What's wrong with Xueqi? He's completely disregarding his life and looks like he wants to perish together with Ji Tianqing. Perish together? You're thinking too much. How can Xueqi have that ability? Just as the crowd was discussing telepathically, there was a change in the battle situation in the arena. The power of the burning spirit blood explosion elixir was about to reach its peak. Xueqi's body was as red as fire. His meridians, flesh, and skin were all red and swollen as if they were about to explode. His combat strength had also increased by several times. He rushed toward Ji Tianqing without any regard for his life and vowed to kill Ji Tianqing on the spot. However, Ji Tianqing saw through the clues and made a prompt decision to use his ultimate skill. Soul Slash. Chapter 16:11. Swish. 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 4 golden swords tore through the sky. Regardless of whether it was the monstrous flames or the sky full of spear shadows, they were unable to stop the golden swords' attack. All obstacles were destroyed by the golden swords. In the next moment, 4 golden light magic swords pierced Xueqi, piercing his shoulders and legs respectively. Bam, 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 bam. The 4 golden swords pierced through his body. The violent impact sent him flying and crashing into the 5-colored light shield at the edge of the square. The 4 golden swords were so powerful that they pierced into the 5-colored light shield. Xueqi was also nailed to the 5-colored light shield by the 4 golden swords. No matter how hard he struggled, the 4 golden swords did not move or dissipate. He could not break free in a short period of time. Ji Tianqing stood at the other end of the square and looked at him coldly from 2,000 feet away. Xueqi, the outcome has been decided. Admit defeat. Everyone who heard this thought that it was a matter of course. No one thought that Ji Tianqing was arrogant. After all, Xueqi was nailed to the formation light shield before he could even touch the corner of Ji Tianqing's clothes. The difference in strength was too great. However, Xueqi had gone crazy and could not listen to anything. His body swelled violently and his skin and flesh cracked continuously. His entire body was burning with blood-red flames. An incomparably violent flame current erupted from his body. No, I don't want to die. Xueqi struggled wildly and used all his strength to let out a final roar. A deep and vigorous roar reverberated within the light shield of the formation. In the next moment, his entire body exploded with a bang. His fleshly body and nascent spirit had turned into surging, bloody light that spread out in all directions in the form of overwhelming bloody flames. It was like a blood-red mushroom cloud rose into the sky and quickly filled the entire formation. The earth-shattering explosion was like a thunderclap that resounded in the sky for hundreds of miles. The entire peak of Mount God's Seal shook violently. The raging blood-red flames crazily attacked the defensive formation, causing the five-colored light barrier to shake violently. At that moment, everyone was stunned. The Great Guardian, Hong Qingtian, the 6 divine messengers, and more than 20 geniuses were dumbfounded. No one expected Hua Qingyu to explode. How could this be? Is this a self-explosion? Why did Hua Qingyu self-explode? Oh my god! It's just the God-disciple assessment. Even if he is eliminated, he will be sent to the mines. Why did he have to self-explode? Hua Qingyu is usually very ordinary and low-key. He doesn't seem like a crazy person. Why would he do something so crazy? The self-explosion of an primordial spirit is. This time, Ji Tianqing is definitely done for. Even if he doesn't die from the explosion, he will be seriously injured. Everyone cried out in surprise and disgust and disbelief. In the next moment, the Great Guardian and Hong Qingtian came back to their senses. Their faces changed drastically, and they rushed into the five-colored light barrier without caring about anything else. Oh no! Ji Tianqing is going to die. Oh no, Tianqing is okay. However, before they could rush into the defensive formation, Ji Tianqing's voice rang in their heads. Don't worry, I'm fine. When the Great Guardian and Hong Qingtian heard this, they finally let out a sigh of relief. They had been in charge of Mount God's Seal for many years and had presided over countless God-disciple assessments. They rarely encountered such an accident. As long as it was a normal person, who would self-destruct to attack their opponent? After a long time, the blood-red flames in the five-colored light shield dissipated. Everyone stared at the arena, waiting for the result. Lan Yiqing and Mad Dragon in particular had complicated expressions and their hearts were in their throats. Both of them were looking forward to it, hoping that Hua Qingyu's self-destruction would kill Ji Tianqing on the spot. Even if it did not, it would be a good thing if Ji Tianqing was seriously injured. However, when all the flames and dust dissipated, the two of them were dumbfounded when they saw the scene in the arena. Ji Tianqing, dressed in a white robe, was standing in the arena unscathed. There was not a single injury on his body. Even the jade crown and hairstyle on his head were as good as new. The terrifying power of Hua Qingyu's self-destruction had no effect on him at all. The Great Guardian, Hong Qingtian, several divine envoys, and many other geniuses were in disbelief. Lan Yiqing and Mad Dragon looked terrible. They gritted their teeth in anger. Damn bastard! Not only is he not dead, he is not injured at all. How is this possible? Hua Qingyu has the strength of a 5th-level Essence Soul Realm cultivator. The power of his self-explosion can kill a 6th-level Essence Soul Realm cultivator. How can Ji Tianqing be unscathed? Even if the two of them could not accept the result, the truth was right in front of them. No matter how angry they were, it was useless. The Great Guardian announced the result with a dignified expression. He said loudly, "The second battle, Ji Tianqing wins." Let me reiterate that today's God-disciple assessment is a fair competition and not a fight to the death. If anyone uses such extreme means again, I will not let them off easily. The crowd heard the Great Guardian's warning and felt ashamed. They muttered to themselves, other than that lunatic Hua Qingyu, who would self-explode for a test? Ji Tianqing left the arena calmly and walked out of the five-colored light shield. He glanced coldly at Lan Yiqing and Mad Dragon before turning to walk back to Hong Qingtian's side. Lan Yiqing and Mad Dragon trembled when he looked at them. They lowered their heads guiltily. However, the Great Guardian's warning and Ji Tianqing's glare could not extinguish the fire of hatred in their hearts. Hong Qingtian saw that Ji Tianqing had returned safely. He looked at him seriously and reminded him through voice transmission, "Tianqing, what happened to Hua Qingyu? Why did he self-explode all of a sudden?" Ji Tianqing looked nonchalant and said with a smile, "Elder Hong, are you suspecting that I used a secret technique to explode him?" "That's not it." Hong Qingtian shook his head and said in a complicated tone, "I just don't understand. What kind of blood feud would make him so crazy?" Ji Tianqing smiled and said calmly, "Who knows? Maybe that guy was bewitched by someone?" Hong Qingtian thought for a moment and reminded him solemnly, "Tianqing, I saw the scene when Hua Qingyu self-destructed. It didn't look like a normal self-destruct. It's very likely that he used some kind of secret technique or elixir pill. I don't know much about the feud between you and the Chu Yun Empire and I won't interfere. However, you have to be extra careful in the next few rounds of the assessment." Ji Tianqing understood his concern and had already guessed it. He nodded and agreed. The assessment continued. Chapter 16:12. 4 hours later, it was already late at night. The moon hung high in the night sky, and the stars twinkled in the sky. The second round of the assessment had finally ended. The 13 geniuses who had won successfully advanced to the next round. They included Ji Tianqing, Qin Songqiong, Song Zhanyu, Jiang Ningxue, Qian Feiyang, Lan Yiqing, and others. Kuang Long was one of the 13 geniuses who had been eliminated. However, the rules of the God-Sealing Mountain were strict and fair. The 13 geniuses who had been eliminated could go through 2 more rounds of battles to choose the strongest 3. These 3 would draw lots with the 13 geniuses who had advanced to the next round to fight for the 10 spots of God's disciples. Ji Tianqing, Qin Songqiong, and the others stayed at the edge of the square to rest. The 13 geniuses who had been eliminated began to fight. This was their last chance, so everyone was eager to participate. Even if they were severely injured, even if they had lost an arm or a leg, they gritted their teeth and went up to the arena. A series of incomparably tragic battles played out unceasingly on the arena. The 13 geniuses who had been eliminated spent 2 hours to go through 2 rounds of battles to decide the 3 strongest geniuses. These 3 strongest geniuses were the lucky ones. They had taken the last chance to draw lots with the 13 geniuses who had advanced to the next round to fight for the 10 spots of God's disciples. Kuang Long was one of the 3 strongest geniuses. He had used a forbidden secret skill that he had never used before. He had sacrificed 300 years of his life to defeat his opponent. Although he had succeeded, his martial arts foundation had been destroyed. He would be stuck at the primordial soul realm for the rest of his life. Besides Lan Yiqing, no one knew why he had done so. Only 16 geniuses were left out of the original 51. The other 35 geniuses had been eliminated. They left the square and went back to their residences to recover. Among the 16 geniuses, most of them were severely injured, except for a few powerful ones. The Great Guardian followed the rules and gave everyone 6 hours to rest. When the long night had passed and a new day had arrived, the third round of the assessment had officially begun. Swoosh! The Great Guardian took out 16 jade slips and threw them into the sky, where they started to spin rapidly. After a while, the drawing of lots ended. The 16 jade slips were divided into 8 pairs and floated in front of the Great Guardian. He picked up each pair of jade slips and read out the names of the geniuses. The third round of the assessment will now begin. First match, Yin Wu Ke versus Lan Yiqing. The second match was between Qin Songqiong and Li Jiudao. The third match was between Ji Tianqing and Mad Dragon. The fourth match, Jiang Ningxue versus. The 16 young geniuses wore complicated expressions as they murmured in their hearts after hearing the Great Guardian's announcement. Yin Wuke and Lan Yiqing were both geniuses of the Chu Yun Empire. It was considered a civil war between the two of them, which was very disadvantageous to the Outcloud Empire. However, the Chu Yun Empire had fallen apart and only existed in name. Even if they had a civil war, not many people would sympathize with them. Lan Yiqing's face was gloomy. He looked at Yin Wu Ke with hostility. Although it was quite a pity that she couldn't compete with Ji Tianqing. However, Yin Wu Ke and Ji Tianqing were good friends, so she transferred her hatred towards Ji Tianqing to Yin Wu. Quebec Wu Ke could feel her hatred and killing intent, but he didn't care. In the past few months, he had been cultivating the limitless Yin Yang skill. He had made some progress and was extremely confident in himself. Out of everyone, the most excited person was Mad Dragon. He clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. His eyes shone with excitement as he roared in his heart. Ha ha ha! The heavens are helping me. This is the will of the heavens. Even the heavens are helping me. Ji Tianqing is dead meat. With the burning soul blood explosion pill and the soul-destroying nail, I will destroy his body and soul. As he roared in his heart, his eyes shone with blood-red killing intent as he looked at Ji Tianqing from afar. Coincidentally, Ji Tianqing was also staring at him with a cold gaze, and a mocking sneer hung on the corner of his mouth. Seeing Ji Tianqing's reaction, Mad Dragon's heart skipped a beat. Ji Tianqing. Could it be that he has already noticed my plan and seen through my thoughts? After being stunned for a while, he came back to his senses and laughed coldly. Humph. So what if he has seen through my plan? The results of the draw have already been decided. I will fight him. Anyway, he had already made up his mind to die. With his two powerful trump cards, he would definitely be able to drag Ji Tianqing down with him. Soon, the third round of the test began. Yin Wuck and Lan Yiqing stepped into the array and stood still in the arena. Both of them were silent as they looked at each other coldly. Hearing the Great Guardian's command, both of them took out the Yin Yang umbrella and the extreme ice sword without hesitation and began to fight fiercely. Half a year ago, Lan Yiqing was the #1 genius of the Chu Yun Empire. Her strength far exceeded Yin Wuck's. She had mastered the primordial spirit sword control technique and the Xianbing sword realm. She also had the tribulation level extreme ice sword. Now, she was at the 6th level of the primordial spirit realm and was close to the 7th level. Her strength had increased by several times. She was confident that she could defeat Yin Wuck. After all, she knew him very well. However, not long after the two of them started fighting, she repeatedly revealed a look of astonishment, and her heart was incomparably shocked. The current Yin Wuck was clearly not the same Yin Wuck from half a year ago. Not only was he stronger, but the secret techniques he used were also unfamiliar to Lan Yiqing. Especially the Yin Yang umbrella. Under his control, it could appear and disappear unpredictably. It was ever-changing and unbelievably powerful. The two of them had only exchanged 20 moves when Lan Yiqing was at a disadvantage. She was sent flying by Yin Wuck's palm strike. After 40 moves, Lan Yiqing was forced to retreat. She had almost no strength to fight back. Her injuries were also worsening. After 100 moves, Lan Yiqing was bleeding from all her orifices. She was sent flying and crashed into the 5-colored light barrier. Before she could get up, Yin Wuck had already descended from the sky. He held the Yin Yang umbrella and released a huge wheel. It was a black and white wheel. It carried the power of Yin and Yang in the world as it came crashing down. Lan Yiqing's expression changed drastically. She waved the extreme ice sword with all her strength, wanting to form the Xianbing sword realm to block it. However, with a loud boom, the sword realm that had not yet formed was shattered by the black and white wheel. She was also suppressed by the black and white wheel. She crashed into the ground pathetically. Her vision turned black and she fainted. The battle ended. Yin Wuck had won easily. After the Great Guardian announced the result, Yin Wuck held the Yin Yang umbrella and slowly left the arena. The unconscious Lan Yiqing was also carried away by the golden armored guards. Seeing this scene, everyone realized that Yin Wuck's strength had increased by a lot. Kuang Long's expression was very dark. His eyes were filled with hatred and killing intent. Hua Qingyu is dead. Lan Yiqing has been defeated. I'm the only one left. Ji Tianqing, I can't wait any longer. Let's welcome death together. Chapter 16:13. Soon, the second round of the battle began. Qin Songqiong, who was dressed in gray linen clothes, was the first to enter the ring. He held his Songqiong saber and stood proudly in the middle of the ring. His opponent was a burly middle-aged man. His name was Li Jiudao. Coincidentally, he was also a genius expert who used the saber. His saber skills were exquisite. Unfortunately, he was unlucky to have encountered the #1 genius, Qin Songqiong. Compared to Qin Songqiong's ferocious saber skills, his saber skills paled in comparison. They were inferior and clumsy. After exchanging 30 blows, Li Jiudao's saber was knocked out of his hand. He spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backward. Li Jiudao was straightforward. He admitted defeat without hesitation. After all, from the moment the results of the draw came out, he had already predicted the result. He could only admit that he was unlucky to have fought with Qin Songqiong in the same ring. Seeing that Li Jiudao had admitted defeat, Qin Songqiong kept his saber and did not attack again. After the Great Guardian announced the result, the two of them left the ring one after another. Next, the third round of the battle began. Ji Tianqing strode into the array light shield and stood in the middle of the ring. Kuang Long took the burning spirit blood explosion elixir and entered the array light shield aggressively. He flew to the middle of the ring. He and Ji Tianqing were 100 feet apart. They looked at each other coldly. Although he had taken the burning spirit blood explosion elixir, he was in the same situation as Hua Qingyu. The violent effect of the elixir exploded in his body and attacked his primordial spirit. It made him violent and bloodthirsty. However, he did not lose his mind. he could still remain calm. He stared at Ji Tianqing and sneered. He asked in a mocking tone, "Ji Tianqing, before the battle, I would like to ask you a question. Are you afraid of death?" Many guardians, divine messengers, and geniuses in the square were puzzled and frowning. No one expected Kuang Long to ask such a strange question. Everyone guessed that Ji Tianqing would not answer. Or maybe he was not afraid of a question. However, to everyone's surprise, Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a while. He then nodded solemnly. "Of course, I am afraid. Therefore, those who want me dead will definitely die first." Hearing this answer, everyone in the square showed a strange expression. Many people pondered for a moment before revealing expressions of shock and admiration. This Ji Tianqing really can't be judged by common sense. Interesting. If he says he's not afraid, then he's being hypocritical. But his answer was impeccable, and he was extremely confident and arrogant. "You're still as arrogant as ever." Just as everyone was discussing in low voices, Kuang Long spoke again. "Haha, you've always been arrogant and conceited. I thought you weren't afraid of death." "Unfortunately, I'm not afraid of death. As long as I die a worthy death, I will die without hesitation." As he spoke, a murderous aura burst out from his body, and a dark red flame lit up behind him. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing immediately frowned as he saw the clues. There's a violent energy fluctuation in Kuang Long's body, and his combat strength has also increased by several times. Is he in the same situation as Hua Qingyu? Could it be that he also wants to self-destruct and die with me? Just as this thought appeared in his mind, Kuang Long had already rushed over like a flash of light, not giving him any time to think. Flying Dragon Claw. Kuang Long leaped into the sky and waved the bronze chain wrapped around his body. Dazzling flames condensed into 6 giant flaming claws that grabbed at Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing did not hesitate to draw the black dragon sword and counterattack with it. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. He waved the black dragon sword and slashed out 6 sword radiances at lightning speed toward Kuang Long in the sky. Bam, 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 bam. A series of muffled sounds rang out as the 6 sword radiances collided with the giant claws and exploded at the same time. Kuang Long did not stop. He waved the bronze chain recklessly and smashed it down from the sky. Ji Tianqing put his left hand behind his back and held the black dragon sword in his right hand. He used the stealth step and disappeared instantly. In the next moment, he teleported thousands of feet away, dodged Kuang Long's attack, and slashed at Kuang Long with his sword. Kuang Long had no time to dodge and could only block with the bronze chain. Clang! The crisp sound of metal clashing rang out. The simple bronze chain was cut apart by the black dragon sword on the spot. Following that, Kuang Long pounced on Ji Tianqing like a madman. He did not care about his own safety at all and fought with his life on the line. Ji Tianqing used the stealth step and his figure flickered continuously in the sky. He was sometimes east, sometimes west, sometimes left, and sometimes right. It was impossible to catch him. Kuang Long attacked wildly for more than 10 times, but he could not even touch the corner of his clothes. On the contrary, he kept attacking with his sword and cut off all 6 of Kuang Long's bronze chains. He even left a few deep bloody grooves on Kuang Long's body. Soon, 10 breaths of time passed. The power of the burning spirit blood explosion pill finally erupted completely. Kuang Long's combat strength increased by 8 times. His entire body swelled violently and his whole body burned with blood-red flames. The extreme pain caused his face to contort. He was in so much pain that he wanted to die. He was on the verge of collapse. He no longer fought with Ji Tianqing and decisively used his strongest killing move. Tyrant Dragon rumbles the sky. He roared with a loud voice. Flames surged out of his body and his body transformed into a giant flaming dragon that was 10,000 feet long. This flaming dragon was extremely majestic. Its body was 10,000 feet long and it was like a flaming mountain range. It circled in the sky and waved its 4 dragon claws crazily. In an instant, hundreds of giant flaming claws descended from the sky. Instantly, the arena within a radius of 20,000 feet was sealed by the giant flaming claws. It wanted to destroy the entire arena so that Ji Tianqing had nowhere to hide. Moreover, it had locked onto Ji Tianqing's aura and used its huge dragon head to smash Ji Tianqing. Despite being in such a dangerous situation, Ji Tianqing still managed to remain calm. He could see that Kuang Long was on the verge of self-destruction and was about to lose control. However, He was in the arena and had to think of a way to resist. It was impossible for him to escape the arena. At the critical moment, he did not hesitate to use his primordial spirit golden sword and slashed at the flaming dragon with all his might. Bang! 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 In a series of muffled sounds, the primordial spirit golden sword shattered more than 30 giant flaming claws and slashed at the flaming dragon. The flaming dragon was cut in half by the primordial spirit golden sword and broke into two on the spot. At the same time, dozens of flaming claws slammed into the arena at the same time and drowned Ji Tianqing's figure. Boom! 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 A deafening sound burst out, reverberating endlessly in the sky. The ground within a radius of 20,000 feet was immediately turned into ruins and was enveloped by endless flames. The entire Mount God bestowment was shaken by such a powerful impact. Ji Tianqing's dermic power shield was also shattered. His hair was messy and draped over his shoulders. His face was a little pale. Obviously, he relied on his powerful dermic power and strong physical defense to block the attack of the flaming dragon claws. However, at this moment, the flaming dragon that was broken in two suddenly waved its front claws and shot out a dark and sharp cold light towards Ji Tianqing. Chapter 16:14. Soul-Vanquishing Nail. This was Kuang Long's trump card, a mid-grade tribulation-level Dharma treasure. It was the most insidious item. It could pierce through dermic power shields and bodies, directly destroying a warrior's essence soul. Although the soul-vanquishing nail was a mid-grade tribulation-level Dharma treasure like Lan Yiqing's extreme ice sword, it was a Dharma treasure. The extreme ice sword was a Dharma treasure that could be used for long periods of time. The soul-vanquishing nail was a consumable Dharma treasure. It would explode after one use. There was a fundamental difference between the two. Therefore, the soul-vanquishing nail was several times stronger than the extreme ice sword. Kuang Long had once used this insidious Dharma treasure to kill a 9th Firmament Essence Soul Realm expert in a sneak attack. He firmly believed that Ji Tianqing was dead for sure. His essence soul would be destroyed by the soul-vanquishing nail. Swoosh! In an instant, the black beam arrived in front of Ji Tianqing and was about to pierce his forehead. At the critical moment, he sensed the impending danger of death, but he remained calm. His eyes were as sharp as lightning as he stared at the incoming black beam. He instantly opened the third eye on his forehead and released an endless amount of purple divine lightning towards the black light. The dazzling purple lightning condensed into a 30-foot-long divine lightning beam. It collided with the cold black beam, producing a thunderous roar. Boom! The cold black beam was instantly drowned by the lightning. It could not withstand the might of the divine lightning beam and was shattered. The half-foot-long soul-vanquishing nail was also sent flying by the terrifying might of the divine lightning. Swoosh! The soul-vanquishing nail flew 10,000 feet away and struck the flaming dragon's tail. Boom! The soul-vanquishing nail exploded, blasting half of the flaming dragon into smithereens and emitting a black beam. Kuang Long was dumbfounded. He only had half of his body left. His massive dragon head was still bulging. His dragon eyes were protruding as he stared at Ji Tianqing. No! How is this possible? He was filled with despair and extreme grief. Originally, he was determined to obtain it and was certain that the spirit-destroying nail could kill Ji Tianqing. Even if he could not kill him, he could severely injure Ji Tianqing. However, Ji Tianqing was unharmed. The soul-vanquishing nail flew back and destroyed half of his dragon body. His plan had been half destroyed. The incomparably violent explosive power fiercely battered half of his dragon body. The burning soul blood explosion pill's strength had reached its limits. He could no longer suppress it, and half of his dragon body was about to explode. Ji! Even if I die, I'll drag you down with me. Let's die together. He let out a hysterical roar and dove down from the sky, pouncing towards Ji Tianqing without a care for anything else. At the same time, the gigantic flaming dragon body exploded with a boom. A deafening explosion resounded through the clouds, shaking the heavens and the earth. Endless flames mixed with dark red bloodlight exploded like a mushroom cloud, filling the 5-colored light shield. It was yet another world-shaking self-detonation that could destroy the heavens and destroy the earth. The entire Mount God bestowment shook violently, and cracks appeared on the walls of the mountain. The geniuses, divine envoys, and protectors on the square were dumbfounded and petrified. Everyone stared at the 5-colored light barrier and the surging flames and bloodlight. Their eyes widened in shock. Oh my god. Are people these days crazy? Hua Qingyu blew himself up, and now Kuang Long blew himself up as well. How stupid are they? It's too terrifying. Both Hua Qingyu and Kuang Long self-destructed in an attempt to perish together with Ji Tianqing. I wonder what kind of sin Ji Tianqing had committed that made Hua Qingyu and Kuang Long willing to die for him. Ji Tianqing was just blasted once, and now he's blasted again. I'm afraid he'll be crippled even if he doesn't die. The people of the Chu Yun Empire are all freaks and lunatics. In the future, don't provoke people from the Chu Yun Empire. They self-destruct at the slightest provocation. It's too scary. The geniuses were inexplicably horrified. Hong Chengtian was full of worry and his heart was in his throat. He was worried about Ji Tianqing's safety. The Great Protector's face was livid, and his eyes were filled with rage and killing intent. He was completely enraged. Previously, when Hua Qingyu blew himself up, he had sternly warned everyone. He did not expect the same thing to happen to Kuang Long. Such blatant disregard of his warning was an insult to him. If things continued to develop like this, wouldn't his words be taken in one ear and lost all credibility? Most importantly, there were 2 consecutive accidents in this year's God-Disciple assessment. If Ji Tianqing was really killed by the explosion, he would be severely punished when the Divine Master blamed him. After a long time, the flames in the 5-colored light barrier dissipated. A figure in a white robe appeared on the charred ruins. It was Ji Tianqing. Everyone's gaze was uniformly gathered on him. Other than his pale face and his white robe stained with dust, there were no injuries on his body. On his shoulders, there was a pair of dark golden wings that were shining with a dazzling golden light. Obviously, at the moment when Kuang Long blew himself up, he used the Kenshin battle robe to protect himself with a pair of wings. Although Kuang Long's self-destruction was terrifying, it could not do anything to the golden wings. Seeing this, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. The hearts of the Great Guardian and Hong Chengtian finally returned to their stomachs. Ji Tianqing wins this battle. The Great Protector hurriedly announced the result of the battle. After Ji Tianqing left the arena, the Great Protector looked around and shouted coldly and sternly, "In just 2 hours, there were 2 consecutive accidents. I'll repeat what I said before. If anyone dares to use extreme means again, I'll intervene immediately and kill them without asking for any reason." The majestic voice reverberated in the square and shook everyone's hearts. Everyone knew that the Great Protector was truly enraged. The words "without asking for any reason," "kill them without asking for any reason," made everyone's hearts tighten and cold sweat break out on their backs. In fact, before Kuang Long blew himself up, the Great Protector could have stopped him at any time. However, there had always been a rule in God's Mountain that the Great Protectors and messengers were not allowed to intervene in the battle of the God-Disciple assessment. Before Kuang Long blew himself up, no one was sure whether he was going to blow himself up or use a secret technique to increase his combat power. When the Great Protector realized that he was going to blow himself up, it was too late to stop him. However, it was different now. The Great Protector had spoken and made up his mind. If anyone else was in a similar situation, even if it was just a slight sign, he would intervene to stop them. He would even kill them directly to prevent future troubles. Many geniuses were worried and had to consider the consequences of recklessly using a forbidden secret technique to increase combat power. Hong Chengtian looked at Ji Tianqing with concern and said seriously, "Tianqing, you must have realized that something was wrong with Kuang Long. Why didn't you call me and the Great Protector? If you encounter a similar situation again, you must call me immediately and I'll definitely intervene." Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. He comforted Hong Chengtian, "Elder Hong, don't worry. Those who want to kill me are either eliminated or dead." You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.